God first. I see evil, I evil when I converse.
Not today, say.
This how God works. Play my position, what is given with no concerns. Set it off. Top of the morning, I'm gonna set it off. You living boring, I'm gonna set it off. Shooting, I'm scoring, I'm gonna set it off. Like soldiers torn, I'm gonna set it off. Son of God, no, I am not son of man. Blessings keep falling, the fingers keep coming in. I got you, but just know I'm texting like Uncle Sam. Left to the bank, you know that I'm coming in. We don't do it for the bands though, we don't do it for the clout. Legacy on the line, so I'm moving in and out. Seen good ones turn top dog, greedy ones get knocked off. I keep looking at the bench like I could never not ball. Coach keep me in the game, Curry deadly with the range. I keep looking in the mirror like, who is he? I'm insane. Who am I? He insane. Guess I am the one to blame. What's done is done, won't change. Time to live up to my name. Real will be real, fake gon' fall. Took time with this here, I'm made for a while. No sleep in the while, I won't fall. No sleep in the while, I want it all. I keep God first. I see evil, I evil when I converse.
Not today, say.
This how God works. Play my position, what is given with no concerns. Set it off. Top of the morning, I'm gonna set it off. You living boring, I'm gonna set it off. Shooting, I'm scoring, I'm gonna set it off. Like soldiers torn, I'm gonna set it off. Told my baby, meet me at the bank. Told my mama, I'ma break the trend. Locked in, I'ma change the weight. Working for my baby's kids. Hard times couldn't make the rent. Working hard couldn't save a cent. Lonely nights, just me and God. Swear to him, always made the ends. Grab a paper, see the news. Hate coming by the tools. Walk a mile in my shoes. Something you can never do. Got my back against the wall. Bet I always pull through. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Sending shots, I block 'em. Superman with the moves. Rock 'em, sock 'em, drop, pop 'em. Play to win, never lose. Run it up, I top 'em. Play full belly too. I hip hop or pop 'em. Anything I could do. The real won't be real, fake gon' fall. Took time with this here, I made for a while. No sleep in the while, I won't fall. No sleep in the while, I want it all. I keep God first. I see evil, I evil when I converse.
Not today, say.
This how God works. Play my position, what is given with no concerns. Set it off. Top of the morning, I'm gonna set it off. You living boring, I'm gonna set it off. Shooting, I'm scoring, I'm gonna set it off. Like soldiers torn, I'm gonna set it off.
soul like tires. Looking so surprised, surprised, don't deny us. She telling me she want to be my lover, yeah. I love you when she want to be my lover, yeah. My little baby girl rise on me. My little baby girl ride on me. Maria, 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 ah. Every time you're looking out for me. Every time you're looking out for me. Love you, ah, yeah, love.
Everything go from Maria, yeah, yeah. Sensibility, ah, yeah, yeah. Pretty girl like a Maria, Maria, yeah, yeah. Every time we meet up, every time be like, oh, Maria, Maria.
Every time you look up for me, come on, look up for me. Every time you look up for me, come on, look up for me. Every time you look up for me, come on, look up for me. Every time you look up for me.
She no island girl, she from Kilimanjaro, Kiliman, oh. Nah, she no island girl, she from Kilimanjaro, Kilimanjaro.
My little baby girl rise on me. My little baby girl ride on me. Maria, 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 ah. Every time you're looking out for me. Every time you're looking out for me. Love you, ah, yeah, love.
Everything go from Maria, yeah. Sensibility, ah, yeah, yeah. Pretty girl like a Maria, Maria, yeah, yeah. Every time we meet up, every time be like, oh, Maria, Maria. Ah, now you want to spend more time with me. Ah, do you want to be my wife, baby? I just want you in my life, baby. I like you, boo. I like you, boo. Everything go from Maria. Sensibility, ah, yeah, yeah. Pretty girl like a Maria, Maria, yeah. Every time we meet up, every time be like, oh, Maria, Maria.
Every time you look at the come on, look up for me.
Fate is before you. Choose wisely. Haiti is an interesting proposition that more or less gives credence to potentially if many liberals in office actually see Haitians the way they see black men and black families in America. Haiti is that proud country that was a bastion of hope as it symbolizes freedom and the spirit of democracy. But here recently in the news, President-elect Biden has more or less begun to evacuate and send Haitians back across the border. And because of that, it gives credence to ask the question, is Joe Biden experiencing any reaction formation? Reaction formation is an ego defense mechanism that more or less pontificates when a person says one thing, but they really mean something else. Normally, reaction formation is an unconscious motivation, and an unconscious motivation more or less looks like this. Say you have a car, and that car really is an ugly car, but your friend sees that car, and he says, you know what, that car really is a nice car. That's an unconscious motivation due to an ego defense mechanism called reaction formation. And because of that reaction formation, we have to more or less pause and ask ourselves the question, if Joe Biden is actually experiencing reaction formation, because Joe Biden has had a history of being negative towards black people. But not only has a history of being negative towards black people, He's more or less showing his true colors now as Afghanistan refugees were allowed to come into this country, but Haitian refugees were actually pushed back. Haiti, as I said earlier, is a symbol of hope. But also, Haiti is a country that has been a symbol of turmoil, economic depravity, and also the lack of economic sustainability due for a myriad of reasons due to the embargoes of the past. Could it be that Joe Biden is actually experiencing a ego defense mechanism? Or is Joe Biden actually going to do a schema affliction? Because of that schema affliction, does Joe Biden really fear that Haitians can bring a lot more to the table? Do Joe Biden fear that when black men and black families more or less get the necessary tools to economic sustainability and freedom, that they somehow will more or less turn their back on handouts? I want us to have a discussion on today, and we're going to talk about the Haitian crisis that's going on currently now, as many Haitian refugees are being asked to be sent back. And that's always been a point of contention for me as a black man, because it appears that other ethnic groups are allowed to come to this country free and unabated. But when it comes down to like the Haitians or the Cubans or the Afro-Cubans, they're often sent back. And what we're seeing, guys, is that this is not something that's a phenomena. It's just more or less a recalibration of what we've always known, that many blacks in America, especially the black man, is not given respect many times. And while there's a percentage of blacks, a percentage of those from other ethnic groups that respect black men, and while black men are celebrated in many parts of the world, there's still a percentage that more or less lives to the idealism that blacks are inferior and that blacks don't have the wherewithal to be successful in this country. And while I'm not more or less pushing or pontificating a struggle, that's not what I'm trying to say. And what I'm not trying to say is that people can't overcome if they work hard. What I'm talking about is actually fairness and equality. And so the question remains, is Joe Biden actually a bastion of hope for those that actually, for the blacks that put him in the White House? Or is Joe Biden the same as it relates to politics, which is to influence, but more or less to give taxation without representation? Oh Haiti, how great art thee, sons of the morning, sons of the revolutionary, Toussaint L'Ouverture. Let's sit back and explore this show and understand that there are 7 steps that a man must go through to become an optimized male. And I told you one of those 7 steps is understanding politics. Politics play a role on the structure mentally of the American male. But the question remains is, are American males being more or less marginalized due to race? And is Joe Biden pushing an agenda that does not include men that look like the people in Haiti, and or men and black women or black families that look like the men and women in Haiti? You think about it, and let's have a discussion. And remember this: if it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. Is Joe Biden really biased and evil as it relates to the Haitian immigrants? You decide. All right, Mon Plaisir. Can you hear me, brother? Unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me, brother?
I can hear you.
Yes. So listen, you're of Haitian descent, and there's been a lot of consternation over what President Biden has actually done to the Haitian immigrants. As a proud Haitian or an American of Haitian descendants, what's your take on this fiasco as it relates to the Haitian immigrants? And do you see that as a smear or a slap in the face of the Haitian people?
I've actually been talking about this the past few days.
Yes, sir.
It's definitely a slap because we're not respected. It's to even go further, we're not seen as human beings, right? And that, as a Haitian person, kind of hurts and frustrates and angers me, in a way that I've been trying to control myself to not go off on social media, and even with people who are actually making fun of the fact that these Haitian people who are seeking refuge are being chased with ropes and lassos and whips and horses. It makes no sense, to feel like you can actually it's okay to treat people like that. It doesn't make sense at all.
Right, right. No, I totally agree, and it's very unfortunate, and it's even more unfortunate because many people of color voted for Joe Biden, to the chagrin of many. And when you see this, this all-out assault when you let other ethnic groups come into America, but for some reason Haitians are seen as disdain. What kind of mental pain does that restore in your mind as it relates to being treated fairly as a black man in America? Because I told the public that there are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become an optimized male, and politics is one of them. And a lot of times, Mark, politics can influence the psyche of a man, as many times many don't feel like they get the joy, love, and respect that they deserve, and that they're only seen as tools to push an agenda. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's no secret that black people have never been treated fair in this country, right? And around the world, really. And the fact that we are being used by elected officials to get to where they're trying to get is even worse, because a lot of us are not actually seeing what's going on. Even with the fact that we're seeing it all over social media, we're seeing it in the news. We've never been prioritized, and it's terrible because we can't come together and create our own coalition, our own communities, and fight back, and actually basically not having to rely on the people we are actually electing to take care of our communities, take care of our people. You know what I mean? For me, it's really frustrating because I voted for Joe Biden. I did. I thought there was going to be a change, in spite of the fact that I know he had said some negative things about black people. But at that time I thought he was like the saying goes, the lesser of the two evils, right?
Right.
And sometimes you feel like you have no choice but to elect someone, but something's got to change. Something's got to change. There has to become a point where we start taking charge of our own destiny and our own people, and not having to rely on the fact that these people who we are electing they don't really care about it. They don't care about our well-being. They don't care about us being mistreated by cops, by the system. It's unfair, and it's frustrating, very frustrating. And as a Haitian, man, again, the fact that this country has gone through so much, and we are still enduring, things that we have been dealing with since slavery, since we, gained our independence. It never stops.
There's a such thing that says the more things change, the more they remain the same, Mark. And some will argue that Joe Biden is just a reflection of what he's always been. And as I said earlier, in the clinical terminology, reaction formation is an ego defense mechanism. And it basically means when you say one thing, but you really mean something different. So say, for example, if I say I think Mark is cool and I love Haitian people, in actuality, when you reverse it, he really don't think Haitian people are cool, and he really hates Mark. And so a lot of times that's an unconscious motivation that a lot of people use. But I think it's probably conscious and unconscious, unfortunately, for Joe Biden, because he's had a history of racist rhetoric towards black people. And, some people call the race lesser of two evils. I'm not going to get too much into that. But this man has shown a history. And his utter disdain for the Haitian people, his lack of concern, I've always said in the past when it comes down to immigrants, we tend to be very negative and caustic towards immigrants that are of the African descent, but we let others come in. When you see those, what's the word? When you see that lack of balance between the two, How do you feel about that, and what do you think when you see the lack of polarity between the two?
Well, I mean, it's hard because you can't be mad, or I can't be mad at the fact that some people are allowed to come in. It's not their fault, right? But when it comes to the government, the system, trying to keep out, specifically African descent people and Black people in particular, that's very upsetting because we helped build this country, right? I mean, Haitians actually fought for this country. So to feel like it's okay to do that is really really unfortunate and frustrating, and I mean inhuman in a sense, because if you are a human being watching these people going through what they go through to get here, I'm pretty sure it's not an easy journey. It's not like they got on a plane and get to the border. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It takes a lot for somebody to say, you know what, I'm taking this route to leave my country. I'm leaving my country to take this journey in hope of finding something better, in hope of finding a better place, a better life for my family. You know what I mean? It's sad because when you really look at it, to feel like you still treat these people badly when they get to the destination that they hoped that they were going to be received and treated, fairly, better than they were treated in their own country, is a slap in the face. You know what I mean? It's a slap in the face because it's almost like, well, you actually being treated worse than you were being treated at home, and that's terrible.
And it is terrible. But before we continue further, I'd like to thank Golden Child, our sub from Black Ram, Ohim Drop. Thank you, brother Ohim, if that's you. Thank you. And listen, it is terrible. It's not only terrible, but it's unfortunate. And I think when we see these pernicious things in society, it more or less reinforces to many Black people that they're not worthy. And I've said in the past that many Black men have a low self-esteem for a myriad of reasons. Some of it is because they have the lack of fathers. Some of it is because they've been mistreated. Some of it is because they had never had people to build them up. And so at some point we're going to have a discussion, because I know Mark got to go in a couple of minutes, but we're going to have a discussion about what the incident that's happened with Joe Biden, what has been the impact on the psyche of many Black men, and what's their take on the liberal policies of Joe Biden and his responses to treating Black Haitians as second-class citizens. When you talk to your fellow Haitian brothers and sisters, Mark, mon plaisir, what do they normally say about this whole epidemic?
Well, I mean, it's frustrating for everybody. It's upsetting. Just thinking about it, just watching the pictures, the videos, and seeing the pictures. Everybody's outraged. It's not just Haitians. A lot of people are actually angry at the way that they treating these people at the border, and it's nothing new. It's nothing new. It's something that we've been going through for years. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, it's not the last time, right? This is not the end of it, because again, we are at the mercy of these people. You know what I mean? Because we don't have better at home. We can't do better at home. And that's the saddest part. So if for things to change, honestly, we have to do better. We have to take charge. You know what I'm saying? And again, as a Haitian person who I'm here. Like I can't do what I want to do, to help my people going through this, and that's even more frustrating for me, honestly, because it could have been me.
Right, it could have been you. But let me ask you a question, Mark. What do you say to the critics, man, that say that they were a fool? You were a fool, not you per se, but people were a fool that actually voted for Joe Biden because of his racist past. What would you say to those critics and detractors that say you basically get what you deserve?
Well, what was the other option? Right? It's not even, I don't think it's a matter of, being a fool. I think it's just the fact that we, again, we are relying on people who actually don't care about us. And a lot of times, like, that's the option we get. So we have to get to a space where we can create better options.
That's interesting. I definitely want to hear the perspectives of others as it relates to this fiasco with Joe Biden and the deportation of sending Haitian immigrants back to Haiti, because I think it's a reflection of a greater issue to how the world sees, unfortunately, people of color. And listen, we know that people of color are celebrated in other countries across the diaspora. But there's a saying that says everybody wants to sing our blues, but no one wants to live our blues. Everyone wants the good things that come with being black, but they don't want to live the experience. What's your take on that?
Well, can you blame them? I mean, look at the way we're being treated.
Right.
Right? We are cool. We have the cool culture. But when it comes to having the experience of the skin complexion or being part of the ethnic background, it comes with a lot more than just the culture. You know what I mean? So when you have to be treated like animals, when you are not respected, when you have to always get the worst end of the stick, you don't really want to be black if you're not black. You know what I mean? But if you are black, that's you have no other options. That's who you are. You know what I mean? So I think it will take not just black people but everybody to fix this thing. Whatever's going on right now, the fact that again this government think that they can treat these people like that and allow it to happen and not say anything, not take charge is proof that we're not cared for. We like no one cares about black people as a whole. It's not just Haitians. When you see the way cops are treating black people here, it's no different.
What do you say to the critics to say black people need to start caring about themselves and divesting and stop expecting the government to come to our aid, meaning we should come together in collaboration and fight together? What's your take on that?
I have to agree. And that's the reason why I wrote my book, Strong Women, Fed Up Men, Defeated Sons, Broken Daughters, because we can't wait for somebody to save us. You know what I mean? And the more we're waiting, the more they're gonna feel like they have control over us. They have, the more they're gonna feel like we're helpless. We're helpless. We can't help ourselves. But we're not. But we have to work together to get to a space where we can come to get to a space where we fix this situation. Now, I mean, it's been like this for years, right? For decades, for centuries. Right? It's not just going to happen that, that the government or white people are going to come and rescue us. It's not going to work that way. We have to come together and fix this situation ourselves. It's we need the support of other people, but when it comes to doing the work, we have to do it.
Some will argue, Mark, that we're victims of our own peril because we never learn from history. History will suggest that regardless of what party that you more or less adhere to, that, some say the lesser of two evils, but some say, different things. But history will say that many really have never had our best interests at heart. And unfortunately, we tend to continue to vote these same people into office that have had a track record of negative things. And so, I don't want to get too deep into the politics because it can be very contentious. So I'm not here for that. But many feel like that we continue to self-sabotage ourselves because we haven't learned from the mistakes of the past. How do you respond to that?
Well, again, I agree. When you look at the majority of black people, right? A lot of us don't have, right? Because it takes having to make your own choices. Right? It takes having options to make your own decision. And in a lot of our communities, we don't have that option because we are, again, depending on the government to take care of us. And a lot of us are still not understanding the dynamic that has been created for black people. You know what I mean? Like the government here, especially, has never really cared about black people. It wasn't created to care for black people. You know what I'm saying? So we have to come together and educate one another so we can fix this situation.
Right.
We have to do it. Nobody else is. It doesn't benefit them to do it.
What would you say?
It helps the government when we
Right.
can't take care of ourselves.
What would you say to the critics that, because, you know, a lot of black men voted contrary. There was a percentage of black men that voted for traditional mores, and whether you like Trump or not, some felt that some of his policies were more towards traditionalism and black masculinity. But there was a large percentage of our women that actually voted for Joe Biden. When most people say, when you look at the history of liberal Democrats, their policies are actually antithetical to the sustainability of black people. Is there any credence to that statement in your opinion?
I do think the Democratic Party create more ways to keep black people where we are. Again, it's hard to have a strong or definite, stance on it, because they also do a lot of things to help the communities, right? Again, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter until we start doing the work. Mm-hmm. Until we start taking charge of our own communities, our own lives, and our own, well-being, it really doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. We have to do the work.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, brother.
No, I'm saying we have to take charge. Otherwise, you can have a Republican in office, you can have a Democrat in office. The end result is always going to be the same. We've had both for years, right?
Mark, when
it has really changed.
No, I agree. And shout out to Golden Child for the $2 super chat. Thank you, brother. And to the people that are listening, if you like what we're doing, please donate to Cash App $7 Smalls. Please donate to Cash App $7 Smalls. If you don't have anything to donate, that's fine. Share this content with at least 2 to 5 people. Let's get this channel moving, because black men, unfortunately, in some parts of the world, are seen as relics of irresponsibility. They're seen as relics not to be respected, and also they're seen as iconoclasts because of the notion that all people are the same. So, like I said, if you like what I'm doing, share the content. Help me get this channel to 2,000. And we're going to continue to have these discussions from a clinical perspective as it relates to the image of the black man, not only in America, but also in Haiti. Mark, you're a Haitian American. What was the image of blacks in America during your time in Haiti?
The savior.
Okay.
When you're in Haiti, you look at America, you see better opportunities. You see, a life that you don't have and you actually want to have. But when you get in it and you actually understand it and live it, it's not that full glass anymore. But when you're in Haiti, I was born and raised in Haiti. Came here when I was 17, so I had a full Haiti experience. But my view when I was there was that America was the dreamland, the promised land, right? But when you start realizing how horrible the system treats their African and black citizens, then you start realizing it's really not that heavenly place you thought it was.
Right.
So I feel really bad for my Haitian brothers and sisters who are going through what they're going through right now at the border, because they didn't know. To them, coming here was gonna be a life-changing experience, but that's not what they get.
Did that more or less reintroducing the trauma into your psyche, Mark? Did it reintroducing the trauma?
It did.
Into your psyche?
It did, because it in spite of the fact that you get to a certain space and you feel like what we've made progress, right? But when you start seeing things like that, um, it doesn't help because it makes you realize, what we haven't really gotten that far. But when you start seeing things like that, we're still in the same place that we were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's just different. But when you start seeing things like that.
Thank you, Roger, for coming onto the chat. Guys, if you're listening, please turn off the background. I can hear background noise, but we're having a discussion about how Haitian immigrants are being treated and has this caused or more or less brought new trauma as it relates to black people in America. We're having a discussion about how Haitian immigrants are being treated and has this caused or more or less brought new trauma as it relates to black people. So, so Roger, you've been listening to the discussion. What's your take on what Mark Montplaisir, a Haitian American, is saying?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. First, I'd like to start off by saying that it's very unfortunate what's going on at that border. Those pictures they look very slave-like. Men on horses with chaps, and it looks like whip chasing down people. It looks really atrocious. With all of that being said, the Caribbean community as a whole, I believe, brought this upon themselves.
Okay.
Why do I say that?
Yes, sir.
Me coming from I'm a first generation Panamanian. My parents are Panamanian.
Right.
I lived in New York, Brooklyn, New York. I lived in Flatbush. So just Flatbush, anybody who's familiar with that area, is a Caribbean area. A bunch of Grenadians, Ghanaians, Trinidadians, a bunch of people from the Caribbean live there. And what happens is, they don't like to say it, and they're being disingenuous, most Caribbeans are taught to separate yourself from the Black African Americans in the United States. That is just a fact.
Right.
They don't like to say it, but it's true. Now, me, I'm from Panama. Like I said, my mother's from Panama. I was born in Brooklyn. But you do not know how many times I have been approached. Or you're not Black. They always try to separate you from this, because I speak Spanish. So they're always like, you're not Black, you're Hispanic. I'm like, who are you looking at? Who are you looking at? Because I'm clearly Black. So I hate to see what's going on with the Haitian people. I really hate to see this. But this is what happens when you come over here and you think you're a different type of Negro.
Right. What's your take on that, Mark?
There are some validity to what the brother said. Do we bring it on ourselves? I wouldn't say that. I think, again, if you look at what slavery created, we didn't bring the mindset on ourselves, right? But if you look at the exploitation of African descent countries and Black people, as a whole, we didn't bring that on ourselves. But as far as different African descent groups, Black people see themselves differently, yes, I absolutely agree. I remember when I came here in 1999. Jamaicans didn't like Haitians. Haitians didn't like Jamaicans, right? Because we felt like, either you were superior or inferior to the next Black group because of where the boat actually dropped you, which is really, really ignorant to me. And again, Black people here, like Black Americans, don't associate with Caribbean Black people because of that same, false superiority. They felt like, I can't relate to another Black person of a different culture because I have different opportunities than you do. But when you really look at it, we're all in the same boat. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter if you were born here or Haiti or Jamaica, Panama, wherever. We are all Black, and we get treated the same way. If you don't say you're American, if no one knows how much money you have, you're still gonna be treated as a Negro, right? That's just what it is. So I think, again, as Black people, we have to come together. We have to change this mindset that we have to be divided based on where we came from. based on our, culture, because it's stupid. And again, stuff like that actually help the system. The more divided we are, the more the same we're going to remain. So if we're not educating ourselves to come together and change our mindset and change our culture and change this behavior and change the fact that we see, because we have a few dollars in the bank, because we can drive a nice car, and automatically you stop being a Negro, that's stupid. It's ignorant, because you're still black. You're still seen as a black man, a black woman. So it's, again, I don't want to go off on the brother, because you said some good point, but when it comes to bringing it on us, we didn't. We're still carrying a lot of traditions, a lot of the same thinking process from slavery, and a lot of us are not even aware of it. We don't know how to change it. Because when you, again, like I said, I was born and raised in Haiti. When I look at white people, I thought white people was the savior. When I looked at America, I thought America was the promised land. I wanted to be here because I felt like my life was going to be different. You know what I mean? So when you're in a space where you don't have anything, and those Caribbean islands are heavily influenced by Western civilization, by American culture. To a black person in a different country, this is heaven, right? But when you come here, you get the full reality of what it actually is. Then you realize we are all Negroes to this country, if you're a black person.
Just to add to what you're saying, and we have disagreements with very small points. I hear echo. Can I don't think it is. But everything you're saying is correct. But here's the problem that I have, and I've always been critical of this for the Caribbean community as a whole. We having this talk, we all black, after the fact. Whenever this happens, we all black. Now you figure out you're black because you need help. You're looking for backup. Not saying you personally, but just as a community. Oh, we black now. Oh, now you're black. Now you realize that. Now, when the man literally got his foot on your neck, now you want to claim your blackness. But when you at work, because when you're at work, you the special Negro. I work with not just Haitians, but I'm Caribbeans, Jamaicans. When they at work, they are different. You ain't black, you Haitian or you Trinidadian. They know that they have to differentiate themselves somehow, some way. If it's just by saying that I'm Trinidadian, as you said, instead of black, that is a differentiation. You know what I'm trying to say. So again, I do agree with you, but I not wish. This needs to become before, not after. It doesn't. We don't need to be. Oh, we all black before a problem happens. I mean, after a problem happens, we need to acknowledge that before.
Well, Roger, you bring some great points, and to the discussion, and I happen to agree with that. I think the sad thing is that for so many years, black people have more or less seen themselves as black instead of being seen as American. You can't measure black. That's why a lot of times when you meet Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, or anyone from the diaspora, when you say, "Oh, you're black" or "You're Haitian," they say, "No, you're black." They say, "No, I'm Haitian." And to some degree, they're correct. They have a right to affirm that national origin first. But unfortunately, black people in America or Americans of the African diaspora were never seen as American first. They were seen as some spurious notion called black. And you can't measure black because black is vague. And so I always tell people, when you talk with people from the Caribbean or from Brazil or the DR, you got to ask them, do you have African heritage or African ancestry to more or less qualify their progeny? And so that's where the discussion always go. People say black, but they should always represent their national origin. The problem in America is that we have more or less what I call a schizoid personality when it comes down to identity. And because that lack of identity is still being seen as proud Americans versus seen as black always carries a negative connotation. If we were seen as an Americans, then we would see ourselves as equal to everybody else. But black more or less connotates a subclass. But before we go on, I would like to thank Snuggles. Shout out to Snuggles. Everything that Haitian young man is saying is right, especially when it comes to the mindset that when it's right, when it's white, it's right in the black eyesight. What's your take on that, Raj? And then Mark, I want you to give me your piggyback on that conversation. Thank you, Snuggles, for the $5 super chat. Thank you, dear.
I again, most folks who come overseas from overseas, we have, and I have to say we because I'm one of them. We have this God, white folks is God. Now, I came here. I actually came the same year you came, '99. I came here in '99. I was lucky. Why I say I was lucky? Because I had a teacher who let me know, hey, cut all that Caribbean, Hispanic nonsense. He was a nigger. You get that quick. And I never had the, like my parents, they call themselves Jamaicans and Panamanians, and they're really proud of it. And, nothing wrong with it. But they have their biases. But just to answer Snuggles, it's just right. Everybody who comes from outside the United States, and you got to remember, we're influenced by the movies and all the things that we see. So this is like the big Disney World for everybody who comes here. Everybody wants to be here. So I get what Snuggles is saying. I'm gonna pass the mic.
Right. Special shout out to my man Tim Howell. Tim Howell always brings that pain, brings the fire. I appreciate your hard work, Tim, and contributing to the channel and helping me moderate. It greatly helps me concentrate on the show. So thank you, and shout out and salute to my dear friend and moderator, my brother, Tim Howard. Thank you, brother. But back to the discussion. Mark, you heard what Snuggles said. What's your take on that? And then I'm going to have my dear friend, Tom Maynard Cutner in. We got a Brooklyn connection in the house today, Brooklyn Bronx connection. So go ahead, Mark, based on the discussion.
We've been conditioned to see ourselves as inferior, right? Which is why a lot of, especially Haitians, right? I remember when I came here, Haitians didn't even want to say they were Haitians because there was always this bad image that came with being a Haitian person, right? So a lot of Haitians actually try to hide the fact that they were Haitians. They would say that they're Americans. You know what I mean? But there's always been this negative, interpretation of Black people, of African descent people. So I think that's where we have to start. And even African Americans, if you tell an African American you're actually African, they'll cut you. They don't want to associate with just being African. You know what I mean? So I think there's this mentality of rejecting the fact that we're actually African. And I think if we could actually get to a space where we can all accept the fact that, we are from African descent and we are African, then there'd be no separation, between Haitians and Jamaicans and Panamanians and all these different, ethnic groups. You know what I'm saying? So I think we've been conditioned to see ourselves that way. We've been conditioned to see ourselves as, the people who are actually less than white people, less than the person who is a lighter complexion, less than the person with with the most. So we have to get to a space where we can educate ourselves and change that. Otherwise, this is always going to happen.
No doubt. Shout out to Brotherly Love 215. Thank you for the $10 super chat. I'm gracious, brother. Thank you. And to the people that are listening, if you don't have any money to donate, please share this content. Once you share it, hit the one button. Share it to at least 5 to 10 people because there's a crisis in America as it relates to the mental health of Black men and Black women. Ty Maynard Cutler, what's up, brother? Unmute your mic, Ty.
How's it going?
All right. I want you to add to this discussion about the Haitian immigrants and the malfeasance that they're experiencing from President-elect Joe Biden.
Well, so I'm gaining this knowledge based on me listening to the show, and I don't have the dates, but I'll let you guys know that this is not something that is new, right? In America, there is a quota on how many people you can allow into the country. And Black people and people from Black countries have always been very low in that number because there was a time when the only people in America, aside from the Native Americans, was Black people and white people. And at some point, Black people closely started to outnumber white people, and these are slaves. Once they started having the uprisings of slaves killing their masters in their sleep and killing the kids and everything else, white people got afraid. That's when they stopped bringing in slaves, and they created a mandate to reduce the amount of black people who can be added to this country. This is in the law books even today, and this is the reason why it's easier for the country to say no to an African country or no to a country that have African descended people for that same mandate. Right now, like the brothers were saying, the only way we can get out of this is we as black men have to have true power in this country. And the only way we can have true power in this country is we have to come together economically, right? Like the brothers were saying, we in this country, you're not Haitian, you're not Jamaican, you're not Trinidadian, you're black, okay? That's how they see you, you're black. That's how they see me, that's how they see all of us, no matter your accent. We're amongst each other, you can say where your heritage is and all that stuff, but that doesn't matter in this country. And we have to come together. Italians and Jews and the Irish and they come together. They're different. There was a time when they were divided, but once they came under that white banner, that's when they started to prosper. We have to come under a black banner and work together, and that's the only way we can get out of this.
And just to add to that fact, and regard that we have to come together, let's look at that Asian bill they passed. Koreans, Vietnamese, Filipinos, all of them, they know the game. In this country is your race. And even though the Filipinos, the Vietnamese, the Koreans, the Chinese, they don't even speak the same language, but they know we're on the same team because we are Asians.
That's it. That's
a fair point.
Right. No, which is why I said, we have to, accept the fact that we are Africans. Right. We are Africans. If you want to say you're black, that's fine too. But I know a lot of people don't want to say they're black. So and the fact that you can be half white and half black, you're still black. So it's fair to say that you are Africans. And I think, again, if we can come to the space where we can actually accept that reality and accept the fact that we are our own saviors, and for that to happen, we have to come together. There'll be change. We're not going to be treated like that anymore, because in unity there's strength.
I think unfortunately there's no unity because we have not been taught by our fathers to work together as men. With an over 73% children being born in single parent homes, it's no wonder that we have this mental fragmentation as it relates to unison and as it relates to black men coming together. Listen, I'm not one to more or less pontificate like some would call it the victim Olympics. So I don't want anyone to think that. I'm not saying that we have to be mired in victimhood. I believe that some things we put on ourselves, as someone said earlier, my people perish because of the lack of knowledge, because they reject the knowledge of truth, and so they perish. So I'm not here to talk about victimhood, but I am here to talk about when we more or less expect elected officials that have had a negative track record of coming to our aid, and then we're surprised when they do something to the contrary. What's your take on that, Roger, about President-elect Joe Biden and his negative attitude towards Haitian immigrants versus Afghanistan immigrants?
Well, it's not surprising. We have Joe Biden is not a new politician. He has been in office for damn near 40, 50 years. We know who this man is. There's no surprises. Nobody should be surprised what's happening in the border. We shouldn't be surprised in what happened in Afghanistan. We should not be surprised at what Joe Biden is doing because he has a lengthy track record of doing wrong for black people. He has. Right. So it's just like, like females, like, I don't know what happened. You know exactly what happened. Stop acting stupid. Yeah, like, females be like, oh, I don't know. You know what happened. Stop. You not knowing is not an excuse. Even if it is true that you didn't know, that's not a legitimate excuse. Most of us, and this is all around, we want to, let's take people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. We want to assign people to do stuff for us instead of we doing it ourselves. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So, they just look at, well, we both, Biden said this and we voted. And that's one thing about voting. Voting is one of those things, a trick. It's a very, I don't want to get politics, but it's a tricky thing. You feel like you're doing something because you voted, and I don't believe you are. I don't think you are. I will end with this, especially with during the lockdown where you had all those things happening with the Minnesota or wherever George Floyd got killed. A lot of stuff got changed, laws got changed, and not one vote was casted. I'm not telling you to go out there and burn stuff. I'm not telling you that. What I'm telling you is change was made and not one ballot was casted.
Interesting. That's interesting. Shout out to Yele Jasmine. Shout out to the kosher clinician, the only brother on the manosphere on the Haitian topic, love and respect from Haiti. And listen, I broached this topic because politics plays a role on the mental health of black men. I'm sure many brothers, including Roger, Ty, myself, and also Mark being a Haitian American, can more or less talk about the nefarious effects of politics. I think the lack of political knowledge has been a detriment to many black people. A lot of our sisters voted for Democrat-elect Joe Biden, but I will argue, where's the outrage about the disrespect from some of our sisters as it relates to what Joe Biden is doing to Haitian immigrants, black men and black women and black family? And where's the outrage? Because it's almost like this man that they voted into office, no one is calling him or holding him accountable for his utter disdain for black people. Ty, what's your take on that, Mark? And then also back to Roger.
Yeah, so we have to understand that the way politics work in this country and the way this world works, this country works in general, people come here for the land of the free, right? The land of promise and all that prosperity. When groups come to this country, they're coming here for resources. That's what everybody's coming here for, resources. And the way they gain resources in this country is by their numbers, right? Just like the brother said earlier, the Asian people come together as one Asian group. Japanese, Chinese, they don't even like each other because they had a war. It's World War II, it's not about them against each other. So they don't like each other, but they'll come together to gain resources along with the Koreans, right? It's for the resources when it's political, because it's about numbers. Because they've always tried to keep us out by not allowing African countries to have the same immigration quota that other countries are allowed to have. And the fact that we as black people don't come together as a group anyway to vote together. We vote separate. The men are voting separate from the women. Haitians voting separate from Trinidadian, whatever the case. We are seen as a smaller group. And what has happened is the Hispanics have become the majority minority in this country. There's more Hispanics people than there are black people now. For the last, I think, 5 years, right? The Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Mexicans, they're not the same. But they joined together under that banner so they can gain the resources that trickle down. They're playing the game properly. We're not. We think it's about votes because they get us on our emotions, right? Because our community is a monarchy, so we going by emotions when you look at us and our behaviors. But the other groups, they're coming in and they realizing the benefits that need to be had, and that's the reason why when something happens to them, even though there's a smaller amount of them, even though they've been here for lesser time, they fight the right way, and we don't.
Well, here's the quandary. Hispaniola is not even a race; it's just a culture. There are Afro-Latins in Hispaniola. So a lot of times when people say Hispanic, well, Hispanics are black. Hispaniola is not even a race; it's just a culture that happens to be a homogenous group of those of African, Indian, and also Spaniard descent. And they come together to make up a subcategory called Hispanic people. But there are blacks in that Hispaniola. The problem is some Latins don't see themselves. Some Latins see themselves as black or Afro-Latina or Latino. Some see themselves based on their national origin. Then some tend to mix it into the homogeny called Hispanic. It can be very confusing at times, but Hispanic or Hispaniola is just really a subculture, no different than, Boogie Down Brooklyn's a subculture in black. But to more or less reflect on that, Mark, what's your take on that, brother? And to some of the other Haitian brothers and sisters that are listening, please join the conversation. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry. Go ahead, brother.
Well, I mean, to be honest, you can tell, a black person you're free, but they refuse to leave, right? Because they'll think that, well, if I'm being fed, I'm good, right? I don't need to leave, and I think that's that. A lot of that, are happening right now because um, if we feel like we have enough to take care of ourselves and our family and our circle, then we don't worry about anybody else, right? This is what's going on in the black communities. Like we look out for ourselves. We don't have this collective cohesion where we can come together and create for one another. Like we don't look out for one another. You know what I mean? So when it comes to voting and electing or selecting a president, um, honestly, I don't think it's going to make a difference until we actually create the mindset or change the current mindset where we have to depend on the government, where we have to rely on the government to take care of us, because they'll do enough to keep us in the back pocket. That's it. They're not gonna do enough for us to change ourselves. They're not gonna do enough to get us out of this crappy hole that we are. We have to do it. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So I think until we actually can get rid of this slavery mindset, where just because we have enough money that we feel like we're no longer black, or we're no longer African descent, or we're no longer this, it's never gonna stop. Unfortunately, it's not gonna stop. We have to change ourselves, and even with that, it's not even about having money, because a lot of black people have money, but they look out for themselves. They have money, they leave the black communities to go to a white community because it's safer. So it's not about having enough money. It's about changing the mindset and change ourselves and start taking charge of our own communities, our own families, and then things will change.
Well, Mark, that goes back to what your book more or less talks about, the psychopathology, broken door. I don't know the title, but you can tell the group, the title of your book. But in my mind, that's that negative imprint that a lot of people in America have as it relates to their self-esteem. Many have been impacted by the negative ravages of slavery, Jim Crow politics. And while I don't think a person should more or less continue to relate or rely on the relics of the past, I believe that black people have the power to overcome. They don't have to be victims of their past history. They don't have to let their history define who they are, but they have to own the pain that they've struggled with in the past and restructure that negative schema or that negative mind state that they have. And so when you have these conversations or when you see what's going on in the news, it actually brings back to the pain that really I'm nothing. I'm just a Negro. I'm worthless. And, it makes me angry because I don't knock who people vote for, but I never had any respect for Joe Biden because of his policies in the past. But I think we got to get back to the point where blacks, when they deal with the trauma, Mark, from the past and the issues that they have dealt with in the past, I think they got to deal with the trauma from the past and do the shallow work to the struggles of how they see themselves as it relates to being either foundational black Americans or Americans, a term I created called Americans of the African diaspora. Because some say, oh, we don't want to be called African. Okay, we're fine. You are an American by nativity that happen to have bloodlines that goes back to the African diaspora. I'm 43% Nigerian when you look at my bloodline. Then it goes from Nigerian to Cameroon, Congo. Then it goes to Ghanaian. Then it goes to Senegalese. It goes to Mali, and then I think the other percentage is 5% Brit. So most blacks in America are descendants of the African diaspora. Roger, what's your take on the conversation? And then to any other Haitian brothers and sisters that are listening, please join the conversation as it relates to the negative imprint and the negative policies that have been impacted by President-elect Joe Biden.
I want to add to the part you asked why sisters quiet, because they voted for Biden and why they're quiet. The reason why they're quiet, most females voted for Biden because they have college debt out the yin yang, and they was hoping white daddy was gonna wipe it out. That's why they voted.
Right.
So, Haitians at the border, most of these females are not, they're not getting 30 seconds ahead of time, yet alone Haitians at the border. So I just wanted to say that. That's the reason why they're not saying anything, because they voted in hopes white daddy will eliminate the college debt. And if you go on social media, well, Joe, you said this last week. So relying on females and their logic is useless. Anywho, again, everything you said, we have to come together. How does that work? I don't know. I don't know. We are just so divided. It's ridiculous. We all over the place. Blacks in Africa, blacks in South America, blacks in the Caribbean. We are all so divided. I don't see how this happens. I think the momentum has taken this ball so far down the road that I just don't see as a group. And I always say this: Black American, descendants of slaves or FBA or whatever term you want to use, that they're resilient people. And if anybody could pull the rabbit out the hat, is a Black African American. You have been doing it since you landed on this wretched freaking country. However, I just don't see it. I don't see it. Maybe you see it, Mr. Clinician, but I don't.
Well, I'm like you, man. I don't really see it either. In the tenets of theology, it states that you can't take new wine and put it into old wineskin. There must be a de-evolution of the current fabric that we have. And once we tear down the old fabric, we got to create a new fabric in order to pour new ideas onto that fabric. And I think it starts with, number one, respect for the black man and the black family. And when you think about Haitians, the patriarchy in Haiti is strong. I got mad respect for Haitians, because when I think about my ancestry goes back to Cameroon, Congo. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, Haitians are descendants from Cameroon mostly, correct?
Yes.
So my bloodline actually is related to the Haitian people, because there's larger percentages Cameroon, Congo. Shout out to Melissa C. Loving the conversation. Glad this topic is being discussed at the Kosher Clinician. Sending love from Brooklyn, New York. Melissa C., if you want to come on and join this conversation, feel free. My brother Tim Howard, he's on an awesome job. We'll drop the link. And guys, if you have not donated, donate to $ Cash App 7 Smalls. Mark, I want you to add back to the conversation about what Roger said, because Roger sounds like he's a realist and a pragmatist instead of being an idealist. What's your take on that?
Well, again, I respect that, and I can definitely understand his point of view. I feel differently. I feel like we have to have hope, but not just empty hope. We have to do the work, and we have to educate each other. And again, that's the reason why I decided to write this book, Strong Women, Fed Up Men, Defeated Sons, Broken Daughters, Healing Generational Pain, because you have to realize that the shackles and the chains, when it comes to slavery, that ended, right? But the psychological effect of it never ended, because you have generations of ancestors from slavery who taught their children the same patterns, the same traditions that they were given from slavery, and we actually still practicing a lot of those things today. And the mindset that we have, that we that caused us to be so divided, it came from slavery, right? So I think we have to be aware of that history. We have to understand it, and then we have to accept it. Because if we always try to run away from the fact that slavery happened and it created this whole dynamic of divisions and lack of self-worth and brokenness, we are fooling ourselves. You know what I mean? So we have to accept it, and then we have to start taking action into changing the mindset, because it's really all about changing the mindset and start teaching the next generation and this current generation to do better, to know better, right? To treat each other better. Like we are the only group of people who actually use derogatory names to show love and appreciation to each other. It makes no sense. So we have to change this mindset where we are somehow different from one another, that we are, somehow more superior than one another. We have to change that. Otherwise, again, it's not, like Roger said, it's not going to change. But if we can get to a space where we can actually accept the fact that, what, be aware of it, that slavery happened, and we still continue to get a lot of conditions, a lot of habits that have
Guys, mute your background. If you're listening to the show, please mute the background. Shout out to my man United Fitness. Mark my man Roger on the mission, always on the bicycle. He's gonna be a new icon in these YouTube streets. Shout out to United Fitness. I got on my bike to send a super chat. Thank you, brother. Love your support, man. I'm loving the conversation. This is just the epigenesis of something special. And to the people that are coming in, if you're not donated, donate to $ Cash App 7 Smalls. If you're going through any schema afflictions or cognitive distortions, please email me at kosherclinician@gmail.com, as I am a licensed clinical therapist. And I decided to broach this topic because many blacks in America have a negative schema or a negative imprint by the ravages of trauma and also by the ravages of how they've been treated in America. So we have my man Pete Charles on now. He's going to talk in a few. But before he talks, Ty, what did you want to add to the discussion? And thank you to the people that are listening. So Ty, what did you want to add? Then we're going to let my man Pete Charles come into the discussion, and then I'm going to run a video and get some feedback.
Hello, hi, Coach.
Yes.
Thanks for letting me in. I'm not of Haitian extract, but I'm of Caribbean extract. And when I saw the first images coming from the border, I was so shocked that the only thing I could think of was pictures I've seen of the KKK, destroying black towns, whether it's in Wilmington, North Carolina, whether it's, wherever. Right. Where these guys were on horses with a reign of terror against unarmed black people who were fleeing. And I immediately contacted some of my friends in the U.S. I'm currently not on the continent, not in the U.S., I'm on another continent. And I started to mobilize. I am hot under the collar about this. I am outraged. I'm writing Congress people or whatever, whether or not it's going to make a difference is irrelevant, but I'm going to do whatever it is I can do, what little I can do, because I think what has happened here is that the stark contrast, it is almost as if one plane is flying in with Afghanistan people and another plane is flying out with Haitians on the same airport. I mean, the juxtaposition of these two scenes is so, riveting that it can no longer be denied in America. And one of the things that disgusts me, and I'm going to try, I know I don't want to make any statement that might get you in trouble. So, but we know who the people are. There are certain people who can't utter a single sentence unless they use the word black and brown coalition, people of color. And one of the things that they do that's disgusting is they take the blood of Martin Luther King and anoint other people who wasn't even in the US at the time, who wasn't even in the country, and act like if somehow or the other they are treated the same as black people in America. And I think this is now plain as day that Mexican Americans, that Afghanistanis, that East Asians, people from India, etc., no other group of people in America has ever been, will ever be, and cannot ever be treated the same as black people. It's just plain as day. And we need to stop using words like racism and replace it with anti-black racism. Anti-black, meaning that any group of people who is not black in America have the same sensibilities towards black people just as white. The same hatred, the same vitriol. It's plain as day. The head of human Homeland Securities in America is a Mexican American. Most of them people there on the horses probably beating those Haitians are probably Mexican American people, millions of whom walk across the border and are literally in places like I forget the name of that town in Maryland right now, it'll come to my mind shortly, starting with an L, literally eating the lunch of black students, young black students in the school system.
Right.
I'm just beside myself.
Well, listen, I've said in the past, brother Pete Charles, that our people, especially some, not all, of our women have been compromised, and they've been compromised because they've been led to believe that some of the liberal policies in America are more or less beneficial to the black family. And now we're beginning to see, contrary to that position that we once held in our fragile head, we're seeing that the people that we thought cared about us really don't care. And listen, I don't want nobody to care about me. I'm a self-sufficient black man. I don't want nobody to care about me. I think, because some people say, well, you know, y'all expecting the government. I don't want the government to give me nothing. The only thing I want from the government is fairness as it relates to justice and equality. I don't want government handouts. I believe that black men and black families, and I don't have any qualms with white people either, can practice group economics. I'm not here to say that every white man or whatever is a vestige of anti-black racism. I'm not going to say that. But at the same time, it's just unfortunate we continue to think, I mean, I knew this person was going to continue to do what he's doing, but we get caught up in the spirit of hope. And our egos are so fragile, we tend to accept anything. And it really pissed me off when I saw it, and I thought about my brother Mark, because I know he's Haitian American, and I wanted to get his feedback, and he's doing a great discussion. Todd, Pete Charles gave an excellent expose. I want you to add to the discussion, I know about the point of reference earlier.
Yeah, so,
oh, sorry.
wait, who's speaking?
Go ahead, Ty.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Ty.
I'm actually driving, so in case my sound is bad, just let me know, cut me off.
Okay.
Now, like the point that I made earlier about the Hispanics, they understand that white America, the majority group, sees them as Hispanic, regardless of if they're from Mexico, from whatever they call them, Latinx now. They understand that this is how they're being seen. Unlike us, they're not trying to correct them by saying, here's who we really are, here's our true history. They're going by what they're going by, and they're coming together to gain resources. That's what I mean by us saying that we have to understand that regardless of who we think we are or who we want to say we are, in this country, we are black. Whether you want to be black or not, you're a part of that group. That's the group they're putting you on. That's the team that you're on. If we don't play as a team, we lose by default. So we have to understand that these people are never going to give us anything. We've been in this country we're the first immigrants, and yet we are always at the bottom. We have to understand that we have to come together, and that's the only way. We can't assume these things that happen to us. It should be no surprise, right? The way that politics are played is not by votes. They gave us this dream or this idea that if we vote, it'll make a change. That's not how politics works. There are groups that have smaller numbers, like the Jewish community. They have smaller numbers, yet they have more power because they understand how they play politics properly. Politics is all about money. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. We scratch their back and give them money, not votes. And since we don't come together as a group to collectively have economics, we don't have the money to give to politicians. And a lot of us think as individuals, like the other brother was saying earlier, we think that if I'm successful, I'm good, I'm on the top of my mountain, I'm good, but yet you still get stopped by the cops. You go to your white neighborhood and they treat your kid like he's the only black kid. They want to touch his hair, or they've been making fun about his name. No way you can go in this country where no matter, I have white friends. I just came from a trip with a white family that I love them dearly. But in this country, I am not seen as an individual. I'm seen as a black person. And that's how we have to see ourselves. The only way we're going to get a fair shake in this country is by us giving ourselves a fair shake. By hiring each other, working with each other, trading with each other, having our own communities, controlling our own schools. Like the brother said earlier, that we're under a shackle mentally. The shackles came off. The shackles never came off, even physically, because 98% of us work in a white company. They give us our food and our still shackled. We're still slaves here until we start doing for ourselves.
Right. Pan Kanat said, in the census, Latinos chose white as their race, and I believe there's some truth to that. It's called classism. You know, as I said earlier, everybody wants to live our blues, but everybody wants to sing our blues, but no one wants to live our blues. And it happens time and time again. I'm going to run this clip, and then I'm going to let Peter come back in and finish. I'm giving some excellent input. Pete Charles, I want you guys to look at this, because if this don't give credence to who Joe Biden is, nothing ever will, so hold tight. Fair use. This is a fair use production used for education.
What's your reaction, Mr. President, to the Haitian president being assassinated?
You need a lot more information, but it's very worrisome about the state of Haiti.
Do you guys have a role in keeping justice? Mr. President?
Now, you guys saw that. He just backed off. He walked off. Basically not a care in the world, but keep listening.
Just quietly sunk into the Caribbean or rose up 300 feet. It wouldn't matter a whole lot in terms of our interest. The leading editor of a paper in the Delaware Valley asked their reporters to come down and talk to me and said, why is Biden so concerned about Bosnia and not about Haiti? Is it because blacks are involved in Haiti? Blacks are what at stake in Haiti, and in Bosnia they are European whites. If Haiti, a god-awful thing to say, if Haiti just quietly sunk into the Caribbean or rose up 300 feet, it wouldn't matter a whole lot in terms of our interest.
All right, you guys saw it. That proves what we've always believed, that this man has a deep-seated hatred towards people of the African diaspora. Pete Charles, what's your take on that? Did it give you confirmation to his anti-black racism as it relates to blacks of the African diaspora?
Well, you're a hard man to one up. But let's just go to what the vice president said. It was Kamala Harris during the presidential debates who said Joe Biden was racist.
Right, she did.
If it was up to him, she wouldn't be there. You know, it's a well-known statement about equating blacks in the inner city to being in a jungle that he didn't want his children to go to, grandchildren, to go to. He's against busing. His health is on record. In fact, he gave the eulogy at Strom Thurmond's funeral, if I'm not mistaken. And he's on record saying that these Dixiecrats were his mentors. I think the state of Delaware at one time had the second highest incarceration rate for blacks in America, probably behind Iowa. So I mean, these things what bothers me is the disingenuity of the people like the representative from South Carolina, oh my God, his name is James Clyburn, the Maxine Waters. They have been around long enough to know who Joe Biden is. And, and I'm not, I understand that there's party politics and they can't necessarily, we see even the Democrats and the Republican Party, they got rhinos. Just because they're Democrats doesn't mean that they have to remain quiet. They can point out Biden, racism, or they can, the Congressional Black Caucus can hold a press conference and speak on the Haitian visuals. There's lots of things that they can do without necessarily crossing party line. The so-called progressive wing of the party, Alana Presley or whatever, comes from a very active political family, activist family. And I can't imagine how she could sit there and say nothing about this. I don't know that she's not saying. Let me be careful. The media, the fact that the media isn't reporting it. But here's what's disturbing about the Haitian situation at the border. Come to find out that this has been going on for months. Not the stuff we saw in Texas, but Joe Biden has been deporting Haitians for months. I just saw a link with 344 different organizations co-signed a letter to the White House and Susan Rice and some of these people protesting the deportation of Haitians, even as we have a catch and release and an open door policy coming in at the border. So I think that somebody has to make it clear that this should be hung around Joe Biden's neck like a yoke come the midterm election for 2022 and even for 2024. I mean, this must not go unpunished. Look, the fact of the matter is, kosher clinician coming from the South. Here's something I read in the New York Times on the Trump administration. The Trump administration went into Mississippi of all places, and they, raided and got rid of a lot of people who were working illegally in these Mississippi chicken plants. And the very next day, a long line of black men lined up for those jobs. Those jobs were paying like $15 an hour in Mississippi, which is a southern state that typically don't have high taxes. So in other words, we have a direct link. We know for sure directly that black men are being impacted by illegal immigration. And there's an eloquent speech given by Barbara Jordan for anybody within my voice who wants to check it out on C-SPAN, where she was head of a congressional committee on immigration, and she spoke eloquently about why the American border must be protected and why immigration harms Black America. And so I don't understand how the late John Lewis goes to the border and cries for Hispanic children and allege that Trump was putting them in cages. AOC goes to the border and cry, and I can't even get a press conference from the Congressional Black Caucus. I mean, it is clear then that these people are not representing Black people. We don't know who they're representing, but we know who they're not representing. And I'll tell you a story that made me in Langley Park. That was the name of the city I wanted to remember. The city is now, I think, 88%, Langley Park in Maryland, of the language spoken there is Spanish. And I'll tell you a story that a friend of mine told me, that her sister is a school teacher in the school system. And, little children came in and told her that the women in the kitchen were giving the Hispanic children larger portions of pizza at lunch. And you know how children are, somebody might have gotten a bigger piece than them or whatever, and the children are going to complain about it. So the teacher said she didn't really believe the children, but she decided, since they kept complaining, that to go, and look in a discreet manners, in a way that she would be discreet, and look, and true enough, the people behind the serving counter were Hispanic people who were serving the children, and they were giving Hispanic children larger portions than Black children. Now, we all know that those are jobs that used to be held by Black women. And when you come through the lunch line with Black women in the kitchen, them plates are going to be piled high, regardless of what your race is or what or your ethnicity. This was literally, and that's what prompted me to make the comment that they're literally eating Black children's lunch. And another demographic that's happening in America is that the growth rate of the Hispanic population in the Black Belt. We're talking about places like Charleston, South Carolina, places in Biloxi, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, or even out there in Atlanta. They're making a beeline there, and we now know that Joe Biden has taken people and bust them from the border and send them to some of those places. So there's a clear-cut, unequivocal replacement movement for Black people in America. And I don't understand why Black people are involved in crazy shit like ADOS versus immigrants. But immigrants represent 4.4 million out of 45 million Black people. Immigrants have no power in America. They're 10%. Of the Black population. That's insane. So I think as you can see, I'm just running at the moment. I don't have a prepared script or statement. I'm just emotional about it.
Right. Where are you from, P? Are you in Jamaica, Trinidad? Where are you from?
Ironically, yes. My mother is from St. Lucia. My father was from Barbados. And I grew up in Barbados for a while, and then Trinidad. And then, of course, I spent a lot of formative years in the U.S., and then I traveled. I went live in Africa for a while, and I'm currently in the U.K.
Right. I want some of the women to come on the panel and have a discussion. So Mika G said, yes, he exposed much in his term, and he's correct. And unfortunately, Mika G, some of our women, a large portion of our women voted for this man. And listen, I'm not here to get into politics pretty much, but at the same time, when you think about President-elect Biden's constituents were mostly Black to put him in office, the travesty that he's doing towards those of Haitian Black men and Black women of Haitian descent, there should be a greater outrage from some of our women that actually voted for Joe Biden, but they're actually silent. So to the women that are listening, please come on and give your point of reference. And I think my man Roger said it best, some of our women are quiet. Roger, why do you think some of our women are quiet, or the Black women? Because every Black woman didn't vote for Biden, but the women that did vote for Biden, Roger and Pete Charles, why do you think that so many are silent in their being complicit in putting this man into office?
Again, like I said before, most women, and I'm going to go with the ones that I know personally. All of them are in student loan debt. Every single last one. And this is what they Hail Mary. I'm telling you, the reason why most black women voted for that man, it was because of this. He promised them that he was going to forgive the loans. That was their main reason of why to vote. They made bad decisions, and white daddy was going to fix it. Now, one of the things that Peacock said, he is 110% right. When Hurricane Maria happened, I was working in Florida as a house inspector for the FEMA. Every single Mexican, and I mean every single, and I probably went over 2,000-3,000 houses. Everybody, Cubans, white, Mexican, white, Honduranian, white, Colombians, white. Every single last one of them in the application put white. Not one exception. Not one. So you're right. Most Hispanics, if you look at the census information, and I never looked at the census information, but I got the download from FEMA when they wanted to apply for, help from FEMA to help with the houses. Every single last one of them put white.
Oh, I'm not surprised. It's classism. It's classic classism. I'm not surprised at all. Not surprised at all. As we're having this conversation, thank you again, Roger, for bringing added insight. I love your insight and your tenacity. I want to send a shout out to Rashid Malcolm Timmon for donating $10 to this Cash App. Thank you, brother. I want to thank my dear friend and moderator, Tim Howard, for sending a $5 Cash App. And also I want to thank Sean Whitehorn from BMO for sending a $5 Cash App. Thank you, brothers. And listen, these topics are important because I am a licensed therapist, but I realize that many black men have a negative imprint due to slavery, but also due to not having strong fathers in their lives, but also not having a community. And I have pledged as a licensed therapist to break the negative schema affliction that many black men have had. And seeing these images of Haitians being transported like cattle back to Haiti triggered me to some degree, but also made me become angry and become more vigilant about the deception that many politicians have as it relates to the efficacy and the functioning of black people. Now, listen, I know there are some women that are listening, and to the women that are listening, I would love for you to join the discussion because we love to hear a divergent points of view. While this channel is more or less dedicated to the empowerment of men, but especially black men, we don't separate between necessarily the races, but we do feel that black men have a special need. But there are women that need to more or less play a role in this as well. So to the women that are listening, click onto the link by my dear friend Tim Howard. Let's have a discussion as it relates to the Haitian immigrants being transported. So, go ahead, Roger. Go ahead, brother.
Mm-hmm. Now I just lost my point now. Sorry. Go ahead. I love that.
All right. So Roger, what else would you like to add to this? Did you see this type of malfeasance when you were in Trinidad, Barbados? And were you shocked when you saw it here in America?
No, I think there's a regional political body called CARICOM that has been doing whatever it can to help the Haitian people. They have been taking a lot of their cases to the international, bodies, the United Nations, etc. And there's a bunch of things in the work to take the treatment of the U.S. to the Haitian people at the border to the United Nations for whatever those things are worth. But I want to tell you about something that is perhaps the most egregious. There's a woman called Karine Jean-Pierre. The name speaks for itself. Karine Jeanpierre, who is a woman of Haitian extract, who I think was the press secretary. She was on Biden's transition team, and I think she was tabbed to be the deputy press secretary or something for Kamala Harris. What is she doing? She was a professor of international relations, a political scientist. She's a black lesbian living with a woman and the adopted child in D.C. These are part of the Black Lives Matter coalition, right? The people who raise funds on the death of heterosexual black males killed by white police officers. All I could hear from them are crickets. So I'm going to be like a barracuda. I'm sorry. I got a double-edged sword, and I don't want to hear any black people coming up talking about racism, about Republicans and Trump. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Right. I respect that.
A woman has come up. Let her speak.
Okay. Thank you, Pete Charles. Thank you. The people are loving your insight, brother. Anytime you want to come on the panel and talk, you're definitely an intellectual. Please feel free to come. You and Roger, I love to add an insight. but I felt like this topic needed to be discussed. And also shout out to Casual Gamer for a $2 super chat. Casual Gamer says, Bella Biden did not see Trump. I hate Biden, but come on. Well, that's your opinion. I respect your opinion, Casual Observer. But Paco, introduce yourself, please, and what do you want to add to this discussion? Thank you.
Hi, I'm glad you guys invited me to participate. I'm very angry because Black women, and I'm a Black woman.
Yes, ma'am.
Have put us in this position.
Yes.
Thinking white zaddy was going to save it. I am an ADOS, American descendant of slave.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't identify as a Black person. I'm an American.
Right.
And my ancestors laid the foundation for this country to be so great. But we get disrespected in every aspect of American culture. And now I see that a lot of the Black immigrants voted for Biden, but now they mad that he did what he did. Come on. We got to have a political education and approach it that manner. That's how we solve this. Yes, there's more other immigrants, the Asians, the Indians. I mean, how do they get an Asian bill passed and they're a smaller group? They're doing something that we're not doing. I can't blame it on skin color.
Right. Right. Paco, you're bringing forth some very salient points. You appear to be, I don't know, are you a Gen X or you're a baby boomer?
I'm a straight up boomer.
You're a boomer. What do you think this great decline as it relates to, the Black family, the Black community begin? When did you see the decline? Because I'm sure you remember a time where Black families were more intact and there was a greater respect for Black men in the family. When do you feel like this decline began based on your recollection of being on this planet?
After civil rights was passed and we started gaining a little ground, the government put in place mechanisms to hurt Black men, who is the foundation of the family. When you remove him or his influence from that circumstance, that started the degradation.
Right.
In my opinion.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think, I think a lot of our women were compromised. I've said in the past that Black men and Black women were actually mules of society. Now you're seeing the impacts of nefarious feminism that's not only impacting white men, but it's impacting all men. And it's destroying it's definitely destroying the fabric of the Black community. One famous politician said that if white America gets a cold, we get the flu. And you're beginning to see the after effects of that epidemic as Black families are actually faltering. Shout out to Mika G. Thank you, dear, for the generous super chat. Thank you to the panelists. Yes, great points of discussion. Mika G, I'd love to hear your insight. Please come on and have a conversation if you can. If not, no issue. And then also, I would like to thank YouTube Streets for his $5 donation. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate you donating to the channel. I look forward to continuing to bring elevated content or much needed content. As it's important that we have these discussions, as politics is one of those elements that can impact the mental health of Black men and Black women. Paco, winter is coming. I remember a time where most women had husbands, and Kevin Samuels talks about a time called winter. And winter not only symbolizes the seasons that are about to come, but winter symbolizes a stage in life. When you look at some of your, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Right,
yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm, go ahead.
I am in the storm. Okay. I got a part-time job. I'm a tax expert, so I only work during tax season. Mm-hmm. I'm 60 years old. I don't have retirement. My family is spread across the country.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I don't have a strong black man who I love black men in my life. I'm not mad. I know my time has passed, but
Wow.
I am in the winter.
Wow.
I'm in the storm.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, dear. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel like there was a time when you had a viable black man, but you forfeited that by sometime bad choices?
1,000% correct.
Oh my God.
I was
Right.
married.
Right.
I was fine as hell. And I thought that I was black girl magic.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's why I know the death mentality. And I thought that I was.
Go ahead. Keep talking. You say you thought you were black girl magic. Keep talking, Parker.
Oh, but life and reality woke me up.
So it sounds like to me that you had a good, you had a decent or solid man, but you became a victim of your own delusions. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I'm not ashamed to say that.
I appreciate your honesty. And see, that's what we've been trying to tell a lot of women. You know, some women think that they can always go to the man tree and get a man. And they don't realize that a time will come when their life is going to have a reset. And,
Oh,
you know,
no,
it's still
baby.
yeah, go ahead.
I was getting the beat. You know, I don't want to say the word. I was getting that, but I wasn't getting no rings. I divorced my husband and was buck wild for years.
Wow.
I have a master's degree. I was making good money and all that. That don't mean nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Was not getting the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't even getting the play. So now I have to live the consequences of that.
Right. And that goes back to what some of the men in these spaces are trying to tell our women is that men don't care about degrees. We care about you being feminine, fit, cooperative, and more or less adhering to the mission of a man. And I'm so grateful that you are so honest about your choices, the bad choices that you've made, as men are in the winter of their life, but they're also in this winter storm. What would you tell some of the young women that are listening, Paco, about why it's so important to have family and a man in their life, and not to forfeit a good man for the sake of vainglory?
I would say, first of all, date with the person.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just be flying around acting as if you have forever to get it together. And if you follow that, what do I want to say? Ideology of not marrying a person because he looked good, he got money, or all these nefarious traits. You'll find you a good man. And when you do find him, act like you got some sense. Know your place. Once you do that, everything else follows through. But if you're not dating with a purpose, then you can't reach the promised land.
Right. That's interesting. Pete Charles, this baby boomer, she made some excellent points, and she's talking about how some of our women have been more or less compromised due to them being victims of their own delusion. What's your take on that, Pete Charles?
Yeah, boy, that is a dynamite comment. And, you know, when I hear about sit down, read about it, the history in terms of what Black life used to be like, you know, if you want to, one of the things you want to trace about a people and their culture is listen to the music, listen to the lyrics of the music, which is tend to be a contemporary, almost oral history of a people. You listen to blues music, jazz, the R&B or so-called soul era of the 70s, and you listen to so-called rap at its outset, and then you listen to the lyrics of today in 2021, And that gives us a reasonable facsimile of what has been happening to Black culture over the years. Now, if you recall, after the civil rights, I don't think we appreciate how much the civil rights movement traumatized America. I think, you know, we have these symbolistic thing about Dr. King and that type of stuff. But remember, J. Edgar Hoover is on record saying that we must never, ever again allow a Black Messiah to rise. One of the things that came out of the Black civil rights movement over and above civil rights, this whole issue about handicap parking, the rights for the handicapped, rights for the elderly, all of those things piggyback on the civil rights movement. A lot of people like to say, well, you know, if it wasn't for the civil rights movement, that Black immigrants wouldn't be able to come, etc. But that isn't quite true. What happened is that the two Jewish Congress people that sponsored the Immigration Act that used to have strict quotas that only favored Western Europeans. One of the things we got to understand throughout history, that Western Europeans have always destroyed Jews. They are the ones who have had pogroms against Jews, and they're the only ones that have been stopping the Jewish agenda on this planet. So whenever the Jews get the opportunity to put a buffer between them and Western Europeans, they always seize that opportunity. So they created, they put the amendment to the immigration bill with the hope of getting more Eastern Europeans and other people in over and above Western Europeans. So it wasn't just to get, it wasn't to get Blacks here, it was to get a buffer between them and Western Europeans. Remember, the KKK was also against Jews and Blacks at that time. So by bringing in that buffer, they got some protection. But in the meantime, we have seen, I am firmly on the belief that, I don't want to say the CIA, but some organization infiltrated music and put up some shell music companies and caused the lyrics and you look at all the Black women in the 70s were wearing natural and afros. Black men were attracted to that. The Black men were well dressed in suits, choreographed, etc. So I don't want to hear this garbage we're hearing about 2021, where the reason why Black women are wearing weave is because Black men trying to find somebody as close as possible to a white woman. That's BS. But there's been an onslaught, relentless onslaught against the famous book called Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman by Michelle Wallace, which was published in around 1985 by what's her name, the woman from Ms. Magazine. Come to find out that was a funded CIA project. Around the same time, we had The Color Purple with people like Alice Walker, Ntozake Shange talking about for colored girls who considered suicide when the rainbow was not enough. They started cultivating a Black feminist aesthetic, which came into the Black movement and created a wedge. And so what we are seeing now is the fruits of that, most recently in the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm seeing a trend now where the LGBT community is usurping legitimate Black organizations to the point now where I believe we have to make a statement and say, look, if you are going to head a Black organization, the minute you make your sexuality an issue, the minute you even mention it, you must immediately step down. Immediately step down. We don't care what your sexuality is, but we have got to make sure that there's no intersectionality. You want to deal with sexuality, take that somewhere else, because what has happened is our organization has become ineffective. Listen to what's going on. During the George Floyd issue, Black Lives Matter movement, can you name one Black church, name a Black church or a famous Black minister who was actively involved in that organization? Do you know of any? That's the first time in American history that we had a movement in which the Black church wasn't prominent or at the front. So something has happened. They've learned something has happened by the government to kill effective Black leadership. And with all due respect to the women who are listening, Black leadership tended to come from Black men. Of course, with Black women playing supportive roles, and of course, where a Black woman is strong enough and exhibited strong leadership, people will follow her. So this is not purely about gender. But you know, during this, we have Fannie Lou Hamer and all of these people, Rosa Parks. We've got heroic women. We've got Angela Davis. So this notion that somehow or the other it's a sexist organization, so that's another story altogether. That's coming out of the civil rights movement. So I think the government has launched a full press. They have changed, they launched their music as part of the culture. You know, what do? We sing "We Shall Overcome," right? Even when we go to war, we're singing, right? Very
But I
important.
have to edit. Excuse me, I gotta add something to that.
Go ahead, Paco.
Whose fault do you think that is?
Excuse me?
That's the black man's fault. He stepped out of his power and let women take over like that. Does that make any sense?
Boy, that is a tough one indeed. I don't want to go. I don't believe that Section 8 housing and you know, and some of those social LBJ's war on poverty on paper sounded really good. I don't know that the objective was to necessarily take the black man out of the house, but I'm going to use an analogy from economics about something called risk aversion. Someone is risk averse if they prefer to get a short payment rather than take a gamble or a bet where if they win, they will get an exorbitant prize. And by that I mean, the government probably didn't anticipate that if you gave someone a house, give them food stamps, and you know that, and what you thought was the bare minimum for life, that would become an acceptable position for many. You know, and what the government probably underestimated is that this welfare system provides a relatively comfortable life. At the end of the day, what do we want? We want a roof over our head and 3 square meals. You know, and if the government is providing that for you, what then is the role of the male breadwinner? What does he do? You know, and in some cases, as we now finding out during the pandemic, you could actually make more money staying at home on unemployment than if you had to go to work and pay taxes and go through that stress and transportation. So the welfare system then has caused risk-averse people to prefer to get this short payment from the government rather than go out there and take a chance on a job, which if they do well, their lifestyle and standard of living will increase exponentially. But people prefer that government anchor. And I think that has been, but you know, in fairness to, we tend to think this is a black problem. This isn't a black problem. All of those people crossing the border with their 2 hands swinging, what do you think they're gonna get? Yeah,
I know what they're gonna get. I do the tax returns, they get money.
Right, yeah. And so they have an incentive scheme, you know, and one of the things that's even more disgusting as I speak, the overwhelming beneficiaries for affirmative action, and this has been for decades now, has been white women and Hispanics. And none of whom can create I've always said that what black people need to do is say, you know what, we are going to pull out of affirmative action. We want legislation specifically addressing I think this issue about the anti-Asian crime bill gives black people a tremendous opportunity to say, we want legislation with the word African American, or whatever phrase it is, on that bill. That's why we have the Indian Treaties Act for Indians. We want to have a bill for reparations, you know, in kind or cash for African Americans. Let all those other groups who claim that they're being oppressed in America and discriminated against, let them present their history. Let them present their case. Let them get their eloquent Martin Luther Kings and other speakers. And you pull out of affirmative action and see if anybody in America can justify why they are in that program.
The reason why they introduced the term people of color to keep us from getting our just due.
Right, that is shibboleth. What that is doing is it's taking the blood of Martin Luther King and anointing everybody else with it, as if somehow or the other, the only 2 groups in America are white males, heterosexual white males and everybody else who is not a heterosexual white male in America is treated the same. That's garbage, and I think our intellectuals, I don't want to call names now, but we kind of know who they are. We always see them on TV. You know, are disingenuous because they're not calling a spade a spade. They're using all these euphemistic terms. In fact, they don't want to say black at all. You listen to certain people on TV, they don't even use the word black.
Mm-mm.
They use the word people of color, even the so-called Congressional Black Caucus. I'll tell you the Congressional Black Caucus. Go to the Congressional Black Caucus website and go to the Hispanic Caucus website. The Hispanic Caucus is extremely clear. They say we are about immigration and we are about Hispanic issues. The Congressional Black Caucus says that they are about disadvantaged people, people of color, or whatever. You can't get the Congressional Black Caucus to say that they are about Black people. It's right there on the website. So when somebody, like according to the famous meltdown of Dennis Green, the former coach of Minnesota, we are who who they think we are. The Congressional Black Caucus tells you on their website they are not about Black people, and we take them at their word. The Congressional Black Caucus spends more money on their golf outing in 1 year than they do for scholarships that they give to Black people. I mean, I could go on, but so we have a lot of, and it comes down to us. What we need to do. I noticed that Tariq Nasheed raised $1 million the other day for a so-called Black History Museum, a hidden history museum in LA. And immediately I thought, what if we could raise $1 million and go to a Black politician and say, you know what, man, we can either spend this $1 million on you for your re-election campaign, or we're going to spend it over here on this other guy for this re-election campaign. But you know what? This is what we want. Do it, shape up or ship out. We got to get politically astute, get some political action committees. I think now there's enough of a groundswell on YouTube. Some of these people who are donating all these 6 figures or 4 figures to Kevin Samuel may be interested, but we have to have authentic people. We got to have people with integrity. We can't have another Black Lives Matter movement where people are raising funds and then you find out that they're buying real estate and doing a bunch of crazy shit, to destroy the confidence people have in Black movements. Go ahead.
That's excellent, Pete Charles. It's good to have baby boomers giving eloquent points of reference. And Pete Charles, I can tell you're very much well read. But Paco, you felt, Snuggles 668 says, very interesting to listen to a Black woman claim that a Black man had power about something that the government created, but those would be the same women to talk about slavery. So
that's not what I meant to convey.
Okay, go ahead. But explain your point of position, Paco. Go ahead, ma'am.
I think that the men, the leaders in the Black community should have stepped up. He had mentioned that no Black church or none of that stepped up with Black Lives Matter stuff came up, and he's right. Look at our Black men leaders, supposedly Al Sharpton, and I can't name them. They just disappeared.
Well, let's play the devil's advocate because I love your honesty, Paco. But I've always said that black men and Black women were mules of the same cause, and that a lot of our women were compromised. They were more or less hoodwinked and bamboozled to more or less assert or ascertain that Black men had their greatest, were more or less oppressing them. And Pete Charles, you're a very eloquent man. Black men never had the power to oppress. And I'm going to take it to a point further, Paco, and say that Black men actually were going through a lot of mental pathologies that they never got addressed. I get it. It's by default. It's a default mechanism by a lot of our Black women to assume that Black men should protect them. And so it's almost like men get blamed for everything. Whether they do good or bad, they still going to get the blame. But my point of contention would be, there were a lot of white men that were impacted by nefarious policies. And only a small percentage of white men actually created the policies that not only impacted Black men and the Black family, but also the Black community. What's your take on that? And then Pete Charles, I want you to piggyback on it. And then also Tamika G. Dear, if you're listening, please join us for a few minutes. I'm about to sign off. I have to see some patients in a few minutes. I got to see clients. But Tamika G., you make some great points. Join in because Paco is giving a great expose about the downcline in America as she's a baby boomer, and also Pete Charles. But Mika G., you look like a Gen Xer, so if you're still listening, come on to talk for a few minutes, and we're going to close the session down. But I wanted to more or less use this show to talk about how this Haitian immigrant thing is impacting the mental health and the psyche of Black men and Black women. And Pete Charles, you're doing a great job, brother. So real quick, Paco, I know I said a lot, but I want you to give your point of reference on that.
I'm not saying it's the Black man's fault. I'm saying that the Black man, the leaders in the Black community should have stepped up. He had mentioned that no Black church or none of that stepped came up, and he's right. Look at our Black men leaders, supposedly Al Sharpton and Al Sharpton, I'm saying that it's like they acquiesced their responsibility because they were getting the foot on their neck from white supremacy. And I think that if they would have stood up more for us, that we wouldn't have half of the problems. I do know that women are 50% of the problem, but I think black men need to take part of the responsibility as well. Going around and impregnating sisters, some of them, or not really contributing to the community, some of the black men, because there's a lie being told that black men are useless. I know plenty of black men that are married with families and pillars in the community, but they don't get looked at. They looked at the trash celebrities and everybody else who defined our community. So that is a lie. But as far as historically, I don't know if it's because their hands tied or they just empathetic, they're not stepping up to leadership. And so that's why you got fools like Kamala Harris and that lady from Georgia. Forget her name right now, my brain's hurting.
Stacey
Trying
Abrams.
to set up like they leaders.
Right.
And they're not. A woman can't lead our community. We got to have a strong men at the helm to get us to that point. And I don't see that right now.
Well, you made some very good points, and I'm gonna let Pete come in for a minute. Yeah. But I want to say this because I have to go in a minute. Now, I want to ask you this question to Pete. I want you to piggyback. We tend to accost when we say black men were complicit in getting women pregnant. We tend to accost a larger percentage of black men in that bracket when in actuality only a smaller percentage of black men were actually complicit in that negative behavior. But I'm gonna say this. If women were not more or less hoodwinked by the sexual liberation movement, could those women get pregnant? Because women are the gatekeepers to sex, men are the gatekeepers to relationships. What happened to, like great-grandmom and your grandmom that said, keep your legs closed? A lot of women have allowed men to enter their body and to disrespect them. Unless a woman is raped or molested, where do you put the greater responsibility on? Because a lot of the men that we saying that committed these atrocities, it's only a small percentage. Yes, there are some dusty black men, Junebug, Raekwon, Man, and Shermike. I totally agree with you. But that's not the larger percentage of black men. That's only a small percentage. And then also, why is it that a lot of our black women, say 50, 60 years ago, weren't pregnant and having kids out of wedlock versus women now? What's your take on that, Paco? And then, Pete Charles, I want you to add some insight to it.
I'm going to make it real quick because I got about 3% left on my phone.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, yes, black women are getting pregnant, but they're not impregnating themselves, number one. Number two, it's too much birth control going around. So I don't have a problem with you going out and getting your groove on, but we need to protect our eggs. Y'all need to protect your seed. We need to protect our eggs. We've got tools to not have this issue about unwanted pregnancy. And here in Texas, they done passed that crazy abortion law or whatever. Well, you can't do nothing. You got to leave the state. So I think that it's not the woman's fault that she got pregnant because she can't get pregnant by herself. But she has, like I said, date with a purpose, meaning you're not dating just to have sex. You're dating to find your mate. You're not dating to have unprotected sex and have kids. That should be your mindset. But putting all the onus on women, that's just disingenuous.
No. I'm not saying all the onus, but I would say the greatest onus, because once again, a woman can't get pregnant unless she allow a man to enter her body.
She can get pregnant.
Right, but hear me. Unless it's the immaculate
She can't get
conception.
pregnant by herself. Let me just say this, and I'm gonna hang up.
Okay.
She can get pregnant, but she can't get pregnant by herself.
I totally agree with that. You're 100% correct.
But
You're right.
she does have the onus to say, "I'm gonna have this baby or not."
Well, I'll take it even further. I don't think you answered my question. Why is it that women of the past were not getting pregnant at the rate of modern women? Your grandmom and great grandmom, they were chaste women. So
it was a different society then.
Right. So my whole point is, who's accountable for those behaviors? Why did they abandon the behaviors of their grandmothers and their great grandmoms? Those women knew that that wasn't savory behavior. They chose, but the women of the sexual liberation movement chose a different outcome. So at the end of the day, women are the gatekeepers to their bodies. Do men play a role? Yes, you're correct. Men play a role. I agree. I will not absolve. But I would say the women play a greater role, because just like my grandma used to tell my sisters, keep your panties up. So unless a woman allow a man to enter her body, that man can knock on that door 100 times. A man is not going to get in. So I would say the women need to hold themselves to a higher level of accountability. And also men, as you said, should protect their seeds. You're correct. They should protect their seed. But I say that the first initiator of responsibility is that woman, based on the teachings that she's received from her father. Pete Charles, what's your take on this conversation? Thank you, Paco. I love your insight. Thank you, dear. All right. Bye-bye.
I'm going to step on your toes a little bit, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm going to throw a softball for you to hit it out of the park.
All right, go ahead, brother.
It seems as though, in addition to low self-esteem, which psychologists tend to describe as people who seek external validation of self, what we seem to have is a lot of compensatory behavior and compensatory masculinity, maybe even compensatory femininity, to the extent that we have a lot of females being raised in, single-parent homes. They may be seeking comfort from men, just based on just, somebody telling them something to make them feel good. And maybe part of having sex is just part of that, compensatory behavior for low self-esteem. I think we can't underestimate the impact of low self-esteem and the Black diaspora, not just Americans, Black people in general. So that is what I see driving a lot of behavior. But even if one of the interesting thing I see about modern music, you look at Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, and Beyonce, regardless of what they say in their lyrics and their personal lives, they got married and then had children. I wonder how many people have been paying attention to that. Look at Kim Kardashian, whatever, whoredom she may have exhibited according to some people. Kim Kardashian got married and had a kid. I don't think she had any children out of wedlock. And up until she filed for divorce from Kanye, from at least the public image she presented was certainly a better mother than Halle Berry, for example. So these things are fairly complex. I think we don't have a rites of passage in the Black community. So a young man, when you ask Patco, I think her name, about, why did her great-grandparent or grandmother didn't behave that way? Well, back in the day, people had a rites of passage. There were certain things that a lady wasn't supposed to do, certain things a man wasn't supposed to do. And, and you had to respect your elders. And if a child on the street acted a certain way, people, whether even if they knew your parents or not, an elder could scold you. But these days, if a group of young women get up in a restaurant where you are eating and started twerking on the table, you could end up getting arrested if you had the audacity to go tell them, hey, young lady, that's not acceptable behavior. She tell you about your mama, and next thing you know, they charge you with harassing her or some crazy shit like that. So I think, I don't know what the solution is, but we have to have a rites of passage. We have to have some sort of normative behavior that is acceptable in the Black community. And most importantly, what good will that be if we don't have an enforcement mechanism? We have to have a mechanism for enforcement. Now, I'm not saying we need to go to, one of these honor killing system or anything that extreme, but, usually, but again, in many cases, parents could affect the behavior of their children, because they say, okay, if you don't behave this way, I won't leave you money in my will, I won't do that. But we don't even have the wealth to pose a credible threat. So we could have normative behavior, but we have to find a mechanism, a credible way to enforce it. That's my take on this whole thing. But it's really complex situation.
There is a level of complexity to it, and there are many nuances to it. But I think it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that if you take a woman that's deemed to be insolent, and you ask the question as it relates to having sex, did she have sex in front of the whole world to see, or did she have sex behind the bleacher? And so what he was basically trying to say is that all human beings have a base level of consciousness to know right and wrong. There's a such thing called intrinsic and extrinsic motivation that plays a role in how we're shaped as human beings because we're integrated beings. And you're correct. The rites of passage is part of the what I call the extrinsic motivation, which would be nurturing, which would be socialization. But then on the flip side, there's also an intrinsic piece that says, I know right from wrong. And so my point is, even though rites of passage did play a role, I agree with you 100% on that, I still believe that a lot of these women are not being held culpable for bad behavior. You go to some of the African countries that more or less, pontificate rites of passage. I think the more prevailing fact is having strong patriarchal families. When you have strong patriarchal families, when society hold people accountable, you don't see the behaviors that are being manifest now, in my opinion. Rich Cliff, thank you, brother. Is this the same Joe Biden who went to the Haitian community in Miami and kneeled down on one knee in solidarity to fish for votes last election? That's a good point. Tom Maynard Cutler, you're back on the mic. What's your take on this conversation? I'm sure you've been listening. And Pete Charles has been adding a lot of added information, a very intellectual brother. But what's your take on that, Tom Maynard Cutler, real quick?
Yes. So I got a little bit of the last caller, the young lady speaking about women being absolved of it takes two to have a baby, and you have to understand one thing: as men, women were never and throughout our species history for the 300,000 years that we've been humans have never had to have accountability because men took on the accountability for them because they were always a part of a family. Whether it was their father or their husband, it was always a part of a family. So them not being accountable, there was no negative attributes to that. If a man is not accountable, he dies, right? Because men are accountable to other men. We have to come together to build. And before we had buildings, we had to hunt. And we had to come together to hunt. If I'm not accountable, if I'm a guy who lies or I'm a guy who don't take responsibility for what I do, I could potentially put my whole hunting party in danger. And if I do that one time, they're not going to want to go out because they don't want to risk their lives to hunt with me. Women have never had to have to take the responsibility. That's the reason why they blame men, because women follow men. That is the nature of the feminine, is to follow men. They look up to men. They're going to put the blame on men because even if they're not following, even if they're following themselves, they see that they feel like it's the man's fault. And even when they're independent in this country, they're still being taken care of by men, government, right? Taxpayers, affirmative action, child support, welfare, that's all government, which is supported by men and taxpayers, which are majority men. So they're never independent. This whole situation of being independent is an illusion. They're not supposed to be independent. We as humans, we're not supposed to be independent, and them more so than anyone else, because the predators will kill them. The lions and tigers will kill them, or other men will harm them. We have situations where women can walk out and have their butt cheeks hanging out. That's not a natural thing. If it wasn't for the laws in the society that we've created, they would not be able to do that. So we're living in an illusion where women are being free to do whatever they want, and what we see when they do whatever they want, they end up harming themselves, and then they'll blame men for allowing them. Just like a kid, if you allow the kid to fix whatever food he want to fix, he could probably fix, eat candy for breakfast and lunch and dinner, ice cream all day long. And when he gets a tummy ache, who's he gonna blame? The parent, because the parent should be looking after them. And this is how women have been behaving and acting. This is the reason why when they say a woman, women are responsible for childbirth. Yeah, but she didn't get pregnant alone. They're gonna always revert back to not taking responsibility. If it's somebody else involved, they will always not take responsibility. It's just the nature of women. They're not going to change. They don't know how to change that. That's how they've been. That's how they've been able to be. We as men can expect for them to teach them accountability. They're not going to learn it in their lifetime. There's no nature is not giving them the consequence of not having accountability, because they can not have accountability and still live. We can't do that as men, right? We die. So all those men who didn't have accountability, those men didn't live to the point to pass on their genes and to raise other boys who don't have accountability. When you have men who don't have accountability, they're being raised by women, the group that don't have accountability. So this is what's happening in this situation. They're not supposed to be on their own. That's the reason why women could get pimped. That's the reason why women are susceptible to pimps, because their psyche is not meant to, they cannot be around a masculine and not follow. It's like a moth to a flame. They have to follow the masculine in order for them to be naturally feminine. And this is just what it is.
I think that's an excellent point. I totally agree. Pete Charles, what's your take on that, guys? It's about 26 minutes after the hour, 3 o'clock. We'll be signing off in a few. This has been an excellent discussion about the Schema Affliction and the impact of Haitian immigration on the psyche of American men and women. But Pete Charles, what's your take on that, brother? And thank you for joining this discussion. And if there any other Haitian American or Haitian immigrant that would like to join this conversation for the next 5 minutes, please click on the link by my dear friend Tim Howard. And we're going to finish this discussion. But Pete Charles, real quick, brother, what's your take on what my man Tommy?
Yeah, I'm going to see if I could make this quantum leap between what I'm about to say and what's happening at the border. Oftentimes when we speak about black male-female relationships in the U.S. in particular, we often fail to look at something else that was going on behind the scene, and that is the outsourcing of jobs from the U.S. You know, I remember reading many years ago that at one time Flint, Michigan had the 5th highest average income in America, and the wealthiest suburbs in America was the places on the suburbs of Detroit where the people who work for Ford, Chrysler, and GM, the executives live. Now, as you know, in the Great Migration during the 30s, at that time, the world's greatest internal migration in history, black people left what was basically a plantation economy and went north to the Rust Belt cities, Cleveland or Detroit, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Toledo, all these places to get good paying jobs, particularly either in factories in the auto industry or spin-off industries associated with them. And I think at that time, just coming out after World War II, America, I think after World War II was responsible for 65% of international production. So American people had a sense of omniscience. They thought that was normal. You could build a V8 car that get gas was 8 cents a gallon, etc. But as the rest of the world, as the Japanese economy start coming back online, the Chinese start developing after Richard Nixon ping pong diplomacy in the 70s or the mid 60s, sorry. We had the Germany coming back online, Europe coming back online, and steadily American production percentage of manufacturing jobs decreased steadily to the point now where there's, relatively speaking, there's no manufacturing industry in the U.S. Typically, those jobs didn't require a whole bunch of education, except for the skilled, trades like tool and die maker. You could leave high school, get a job, get a decent job, marry your girlfriend, and you could make a decent living. I think once that rug was pulled, we can now see the devastation that it has left in its wake. In Cleveland, the black unemployment rate in all the cities I just called, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Chicago, Toledo, and on and on. So I believe that to the extent that a black man's self-esteem is tied into a job and his ability to take care of a family, the destruction of that goes at the core, the heart of that man's behavior, and perhaps some of this multiple impregnation is part of compensatory behavior, for masculine behavior. I don't know, and you're the psychologist, so you probably articulate that stuff better than me.
Well, it's definitely some compensatory behavior. Some of it is learned behavior. Some of it is due to what I call negative succession, because unfortunately, in some parts of the South, there were such thing as the buck that would impregnate a lot of women. But at the same time, it goes back to what Ty was saying. Many women gravitate to that buck. The buck is the big, violent, strong sexual reproduction. And they tend to more or less gravitate to that particular man instead of gravitating to a man of equality or a man of standard. And unfortunately, a lot of our women have been imprinted by those types of men that when they want to more or less recede, it's hard to break that psychic and also physical imprint. So some of those women have been imprinted by, like I said, the Raekwons and the Man-Mans and the Shermites. And because of that, now they're suffering the recompense of their error, unfortunately. And so just like, like Paco was saying, men got to take some accountability, but I would say the greater accountability lies on the woman. Some women grew up in families with strong fathers, and they still made bad choices. And their girls are being pulled in so many different directions by so many different negative influences. And when you're trying to keep them chaste and try to keep them in the right direction, sometimes they rebel, only to find out they were fools instead of being virtues like the women of the past.
As you said that, my mind, why my mind reflect back on Creflo Dollar experience a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I read where Creflo Dollar was arrested because his 15-year-old daughter wanted to go out with her girlfriends to a party. And Creflo Dollar told his daughter, look, just finish your homework. You know what I'm saying? Finish your homework before you leave. And she didn't finish her homework. And she tried to leave the house, and he tried to stop her. They called the police on him, and he got arrested. I mean, I just, but anyway, that's another story. But to tie in this whole stuff that's going on at the border, I think one of the reasons we see what's going on at the border happening is the people engaged, believe that, Black America is so weak that if we can't, unite with our own women, if Black women and Black men can't even unite to form a family, charity begins at home and ends abroad, right? Before you can help my family, presumably you have your own house in order. And once you have your family structure in place, you can then reach out and help the neighbor or help other people. But if your own structure isn't in place, it's kind of hard to see maybe the Haitian people as a family, or perhaps and if you notice, when my first initial statement was not about the Haitian, it was about the visuals about a slave overseer whipping the slave. That was the analogy I drew, as opposed to, and even though I have Caribbean roots, to think that I would see that as, literally my personal family member, but instead I drew a slavery analogy. So I think one of the other reasons why it is so fundamental that we have, I know there are pros and cons to what's the nuclear family, but the way America is structured and the dynamism of the society, I think the nuclear family is perhaps the most practical for all intents and purposes. And we've got to get Black men and women back in the house, and perhaps we need to form public policy, and I know they're going to be pushed back for it, and say, you know what, man, do the reverse. If you want to get Section 8 housing, you got to marry the father of your child. Maybe we need to try that. Instead of the father being out of the house, how about you marry the father of your child, and he pay half or whatever it is, of the subsidized rent or something. Get the man back in the house some way, somehow.
Right. That's powerful. Once again, guys, it's about 34 minutes after the hour of 3 o'clock. We're having a powerful discussion talking about the Haitian immigration crisis and or the deportation of Haitians on the Texas border. And if there are Haitian immigrants that are listening, we had my man Mark Montplaisir and my man Roger on earlier. Roger's of Afro Panamanian background, and my man Pete Charles is of Trinidadian and Barbados background. But if there's a Haitian that's listening that want to add to this conversation, please feel free to add. If there's another woman that would like to add to the conversation, in the next 3 to 5 minutes, please come in and add. I'm about to sign off in a few minutes. But this has been a great conversation. Todd Maynard Cutner, why has this conversation been so essential as it relates to the mental health of Black men and Black women?
Yes. I always love, coming on the show here. It's very important that we as men, that our voices get heard when it comes to these topics. And what we've seen in this whole pandemic, right, is we're starting to see how ugly America is, right? It's always been this way, but we're starting to see it, and it's starting to be on social media. And now our generation is slapping in front of our face, starting with the George Floyd thing. We're starting to see how the breaking down, the pandemic has broken down this whole notion of independent womanhood, like cannot be independent on your own when you need to go out there and fight for water at the Walmart, right? You're gonna fight a man for that, you know. So and now we have this situation where we're being shown that this country is, we as Black people, all of us, Haitian, Jamaican, all the people who are Black, who have Black skin, who have brown skin, all the people in this country, we have to understand that they see us as one group. All right, they see us as one group. They're going to treat us as one group. They don't treat any of us different, even though we treat each other different. Okay, and once we're starting to see that every time we fight for something, we're fighting to include everyone, right? Where our women will go fight for women's rights. Our women will go help the LGBT community, right? But we're not fighting for each other. And when these things happen, who's in the place to say no to this? Who's in the place to stop this? Right? Like the brother was mentioning about the jobs. We're not in control of the jobs. They redline us and they put us in these urban areas, and they pull where the factories used to be in these urban areas. Then they allow these industries to go across seas. They allow these companies to take them out of sea across seas, whereas they could have easily subsidized, right? They subsidize so many other countries. They subsidize the agriculture industry. Agriculture industry don't really make any profit. The government subsidizes them in order for them to keep that in the country. They could have did the same thing for many of these manufacturing jobs, but because they were majority Black, because there was majority Black in these urban areas, they don't have no problem taking that away. And because we don't have any people in that seat, we don't have any people who's speaking up for us. When you look at who's the one pulling the strings, it's not people who look like us. And even when it is people who look like us, they're trying to go status quo so they can keep their job, right? There's that scene in what's that old school movie? Anyway, the point is, when Black people are protesting, right? We're going to get our rights. We're going to get things that we need. And what happens with the protest? Why does the protest stop? Because they start hiring us. They've been hiring down at City Hall, so we stop protesting. That's how we've been all throughout this whole country. We don't fight for each other because we all after our individual prosperity. If you fighting hard, I give you a good check. You stop fighting. We have to see ourselves as a group. That is the only way. That is the only way. Men and women. That's the reason why Black men are trying to allow women to see things for how it is. Because if women don't see things for how it is, they're the ones pulling us down the cliff. We're attached to them by the hip. We're attached. The things that they do affect us as men, right? We have to have the men and families together, right? The mandate, it was a great idea to have a mandate to reverse these things, but these mandates were put here on purpose to divide us, right? When welfare was for a temporary, it was supposed to be a temporary thing, right? You get welfare when because jobs are similar to unemployment. But what a lot of women have done is they kept the unemployment. When the Black men started making more money, they still kept the unemployment. They prefer not to because they want to be on their own. When you have a matriarchal community, this is the things that happen. The only way we can do this is the men have to improve themselves, come together, start building our communities, whether the women are there or not. We have to start building our communities, and then the women will respond to that power. True power is being influential, not speaking, not fighting, not being violent. True power is getting things done. And in this country, in a capitalistic environment, power is money. We as a group have to have money and use that money to get the things we want.
Thank you, Snuggles. 668 for the $5 super chat. Snuggles say, I just noticed all the men on the panel are blue pill. That is why they care. They do not have an annihilist mentality like the people they are saving. I think it's to the contrary, Snuggles. It's not so much that we care. We're very much red pill. I'm the kosher clinician, so it don't get no more red pill than being kosher.
That's right.
So I'm very red pill. But we're just having a discussion to talk about the mentality and the social abnormalities that are occurring in our community and how we're being impacted by it. Me and Ty's had this discussion in privacy, and we realized that I don't feel like there's a saving of the current community that we're living in. I think we'll take a de-evolution of the current community that we're living in. And as the theology say, you can't take new wine and put it into old wineskins. You will have to change the wineskins in order to put the new wine, which is ideals into that wineskin. So I'm very much aware and alert and quote unquote woke. But we're having this discussion because Haitian immigrants are being rounded up, which in my mind is another form of mental health oppression. And I'm sure when you hear men like Brother Pete Charles talk about how he was being enraged, we're having the discussion, because a lot of men suffer in silence because of low self-esteem. They don't feel like they're worthy. And seeing, Haitians getting riled up like cattle, more or less addresses that negative impact or that schema affliction that many are having. So once again, guys, for a non-diagnostic consultation, please email me at kosherclinician@gmail.com. These consultations are not a diagnosis, which means I'm not diagnosing you, but I can give you parameters around the mental health pathology that you are having. And also, guys, if you like what we're doing, please like, share, and subscribe to the Kosher Clinician. Send this channel information to at least 5 people. I promise you, this channel is going to get better. We're going to grow as a brand. And to all the clinicians that are listening, I love your insight. I love your wisdom. I love your ability to give critical inquiry to all the many challenges that we are facing in this modern milieu called America. So once again, is there anyone else that would like to come on and share? And so a lot of people are giving some good points to what Ty was saying. Ms. Parker said, yes, speak that, brother. And so is there anyone else that would love to come on and have a discussion with the talented, intelligent Pete Charles and Ty Maynard Cutner as it relates to the Haitian immigrant border crisis that's actually occurring as we speak? Anyone else would like to come on? Snuggles, feel free to come on. You always in the cut. But feel free to come on, Snuggles. Tim will drop the link. Tim is doing an awesome job. Tim will drop the link, Snuggles. If you want to come on. Let's have a discussion. And if not, in the next 3 to 5 minutes, we're going to sign off. So Pete Charles, as we're about to sign off, do you see things getting better in America, or it's the old adage, the more things change, the more they remain the same?
Man. I want to pass on that question because I'm going to sound like Dr. Claude Anderson. I see a future for Black America as a permanent underclass, and that is sad.
Right.
I agree. And the reason being that in 2020, for the first, let me be this really quick. I was shocked when I look at the U.S. Census. I don't know what it is I was doing, and I said, let me go back and look at the U.S. Census classification. In the year 1900, the U.S. Census reported 100,000 Hispanics and 5 or 8 million Blacks. And Blacks and Hispanic have the same birth rate. By 1995, the Hispanic population had equaled the Black population, and today as we speak, it's about 16 million more than the Black population. And the data shows that since Roe v. Wade in 1973 until now, 22 million Black babies have been aborted. In other words, despite the millions of Hispanic that walked across the border, if Blacks were not aborting babies at such a cataclysmic rate, they would still be the largest minority group in the country. Joe Biden, and part of what we may see happening at the border may be tied into something Joe Biden told the Black civil rights leader during that private meeting that was leaked. Joe Biden said to the Black civil rights leader that if you want to get anything done, you've got to work with Hispanics. In other words, now Black America has to go through Hispanics in order to get anything done. It's not coincidental that the head of Homeland Security is a Mexican American, and that the people at the border feel empowered in abusing Black Haitians, because even I think Mexico only recently acknowledged the Afro-Mexicans, I think about 5 or 6 years ago in their census. So again, if you look at C-SPAN, I forget the name of the guy, Terry Anderson, I believe is his name, gave some speeches before Congress in 1995 where he talked about what was happening to Black people in Southern California. And I was so shocked and stunned that many of these gangs from Central and Latin America came in, targeted Black homes, firebombed their houses, scraped their cars, terrorized Black people. And as recent as about within the last 5 or 6 years, I remember reading a plea bargain where the United States Attorney for Southern California entered a plea bargain with Hispanic gang members who were chasing Black families out of government housing and stuff like that, and we can't. And all I hear was crickets. In other words, I'm reading that they are doing the same thing to blacks that the KKK used to do, and I haven't heard a single word. When Al Sharpton was confronted with it, Al Sharpton's response was, he doesn't want to cause division among minority groups. So he's under the impression then that there's a black and brown coalition that's going to become so powerful that ultimately they're going to run America. That's an illusion. So, so I think, what's happening at the border is just flat out disrespect. It's sort of like playing smash mouth football. They're basically saying to black America, what are you going to do about it? So what? You know what I'm saying? And those kind of things, again, would play on our self-esteem. I mean, as the kosher clinician was speaking, it just dawned on me that part of the trauma that I experienced was watching this man kneel on George Floyd's neck and having his breath expired from him. And I'm sitting there watching a guy on a horse running down some young boys or young man, whipping him. Or I felt like since it was Texas, I said, well, this looks like a rodeo. Is he gonna, is he roping cattle? Is he gonna then lasso this guy and drag him behind a horse? So I mean, yeah. So these are very traumatic images for us, and we should have ironically enough, if there's one group of people on the planet that should have a battle cry that says never again, it's us. But it seems as though our posture is to probably embrace victimhood, go to the United States Congress and say we are the Congress, we are the conscience of the Senate, and take great pride in being victims. And hopefully some white liberal somewhere will feel sorry for us, throw us a bone, and out of guilt or something. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is, is not nice, not pleasant. But I'm at my wit's end for trying to explain it. But I think I'm going to use this event in my own personal life as a catharsis. I was always, trying to pay attention to public affairs, but I think this one here, the contrast with the Afghan people. They've got Afghan people who have no idea at all, don't speak English at all. And by the way, one thing I wanted to say earlier that I forgot to say is some years ago I was reading the New York Times, and one of the things they were talking about is why the Korean community was controlling the vegetable market system in Harlem. And in the article, it says that the Korean government would lend a Korean, this is many years ago, the Korean government would lend a Korean the equivalent of $250,000 to start a business in America. The idea being that when that loan is repaid in US dollars, the money goes back to Korea and the Korea Foreign Exchange, bank is embraced. And the idea I thought of is that perhaps one of the things, and I say, Black America is in fact, the only ethnic group in America that cannot leverage external sources of funds. We don't have any ties to any place outside of Africa. And when I read what some of these guys would be doing in Africa, they got millions of dollars, billions or whatever it is, and they're going on shopping spree in Paris and buying, a bunch of material stuff. I said, what if these guys had the wherewithal to put some of that money in a black bank in the U.S., invest money in the U.S., and establish trade ties between Black America and perhaps Africa or even elsewhere in the diaspora? I think, some of that leverage, which other ethnic groups do, like, for instance, the Bank of America used to be called the Italian American Bank. That bank was founded by Italians. And so we have to start thinking about leveraging outside of America. I don't know, it's bad. Like I said, it's enough problems inside of America to be taken care of. But this is a multiple pronged thing. There's no magic bullet. There's no panacea. There's no one thing that'll do it. I think everybody working, with the end goal in mind. Some of us are going to go by bus, some of us are going to go by train, some of us are going to walk, some of us are going to ride on a bike. But as long as we're pulling in the same direction, I think, some of us will arrive at different time, but we have to do something. We can't sit down and scratch. We have to do something. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, according to Mao Zedong. And that's where I am today. This stuff that I see at the border is the beginning. Is the beginning of, I don't know where I'm going to end, but it's the beginning for me. I can't take it anymore.
Well, I don't think it's the beginning, Pete. I think it's just a culmination of something that's always been festering, but now it's being brought up to the forefront. You know, Frederick Douglass said it better than me, that power never conceded without a struggle. It never have and never will. But on that note, I want to thank my dear friend Melissa C. all the way from New York. Thank you, dear. That was so kind of you for the great, great, generous super chat. I mean, a phenomenal super chat. Melissa C. donated $100. So I got to get my tones right. That is awesome, dear. Thank you. I'm so honored for supporting your channel work. Exceptional job. Thank you to Melissa C. And thank you to all the people that have donated to the super chat, but also have donated to Cash App. Once again, Melissa C., Rashid Malcolm Timmons, Tim Howard, and Sean Whitehorn. And to also the people giving super chats, thanks to Snuggles. She's always a regular. And once again, guys, we're going to sign off in a minute, but if anybody else would like to come on, please come on before we sign off. If not, we're going to sign off. Ty, real quick, how was this discussion important, and what would you take from these lessons moving forward as a black man in America?
Well, I hope that as we see in this, that we realize that there's no one going to come save us, all right? When it comes to politicians, it's either the fox or the wolf. Right, both of them are going to eat you. You're always going to be for dinner, because when black people were brought to this country, we were born for labor. Okay, that was our initial purpose. That's what was written in the Constitution. When in the Constitution, when it says we are the people, at that time we weren't people, we were property. Right. So this country is founded on these racist principles, and we have to understand what racism is. Right. According to Dr. Claude Anderson gives the best example of what racism is in this country. It's basically that we have the majority group who owns everything. They own the money, they own the jobs, the food system, the media, everything. And then they use that power to exploit and exclude. So even the messages about ourselves, we're not getting it from us, we're getting it from white media. They make us think that we're criminals because they always putting us on TV, the thing when we do crimes, right? They're the ones who are feeding us our own demise, which is why we don't trust each other. We don't come together. We don't believe in each other. But we have to realize that these things are going to continue happening to us unless we realize that they're not our friend. They're not meant to, there's no benefit for them to be our friends. We have to be our own friends. We have to look after each other. We have to care for each other. No matter if we agree or disagree, we have to see ourselves as family. Because if we don't see ourselves as family, no one else will. Now, if we was to come together and we had some resources, there would have been a group of us that could have came and put a boat there and got some of these Haitian people out of there and got them somewhere, paid for them to get in the place, right? If we had our own country, it had our own land that was prospering, that had trade, and we had control of rare resources and able to create a whole industry, we could have came and said, hey, we're going to take care of this. Right? We think that because we have a few celebrities and black people who make money, that they have the power to do these things. That is a drop in the bucket. We have to come together as a group. Once we come together as a group, because the things that we want to do to support our people, all we can do now is donate to some foundation. We don't know where that money is going, right? But if we had the true power, we would be able to go there and help our people. We have to see all black people in this world as our people, regardless of what country they come from, regardless of their religion, regardless of what language they speak, because the rest of the world sees us as black, and that's how they treat us and abuse us. And we're going to continue to get abused as long as we don't have true power in this country. So I hope that the men are seeing this, because it is the power starts with men. We know how to wield properly. We know how to defend power. The reason why they want to take the men out of the place, they want to keep the black community matriarchal, because the women can easily be pushed aside. She can easily be manipulated through her emotions. She can easily be angered, and they can use that anger to their advantage to make her do whatever they want to do. That's why the black community will never come up. It is the women that the men have to be in power, and they take the men out. If you look at the prison rates, and I'm gonna cut this real short, look at the prison rates. 40-something% of the prisoners are black. We only make up 6% of the population, right? 13 or 14% of the population is black. A little bit more than half is women. So that means that men only make up 6% of the community here, the population in America, but yet we make up 40% of the prison population. Whereas, are they putting black women in prison at the same rate? No, they're not. If you look at the prison rates for women, it's about what it should be based on the percentage of people in this country. Yet they give the women benefits. They give the women benefits so she can detach from a man. She detached from a man. Now we got her and we got the man, because nobody's going to fight for the man if he can't fight for himself. So that's how we have to see these things. Hopefully that we're seeing this on prime time. We're seeing it on social media. We're starting to see the ugly truth about this country. Nothing has changed. We're still slaves. It's an illusion to think that things have really changed. It's an illusion. We have to see it for what it truly is.
It's definitely an illusion, and this has been a very poignant discussion. Pete Charles, brother, thank you for coming on, man. You added a lot of great insight and commentary. I love your passion. I love your insight. I love your intellect. You must be a Leo. You must be a Leo like me. And what month were you born, Pete Charles?
No, actually, I'm an Aquarian.
Oh well, that makes even more sense. You're intellectual. Aquarians like Tim Howard tend to be intellectuals. You guys tend to look at things through the lens of intellectualism. But it was a great conversation, and shout out to Miss Parker, aka Moesha. Shout out to her. And once again, this has been a great show, guys. I'm honored for the support. I'm honored for the time you guys put into the channel. Pete Charles, feel free to come back on again, brother, at any time. I love your insight. You are definitely an intellectual. And these discussions are needed as we are actually in a critical crisis and a critical nexus in America. And it actually proves the point that we as Americans are actually living the peril of the things we've often experienced in the past. And shout out to my man, Scorpio Azarel. You're a Scorpio, so we're not the damn Scorpios, dude. We know how y'all do. and shout out once again to Miss Parker, the lovely Sagittarius. I just live. I just love me, KC. Yes, sir. Fire sign, no doubt. And shout out to Tim Howard talking about systematic racism, and that's true. Now listen, we're about to sign off, and Frederick Douglass once again said it better than me. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And right now we live in a time when men are broken, and many black men are broken and actually suffering from schema afflictions. And that schema affliction is being more or less manifest as it relates to what's going on in Haiti. We're about to sign off, and I will continue to bring you guys quality content as it relates to the impacts of black male mental health and also male mental health, white or black, and the many challenges that we're having in America. Remember this, there are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become an optimized male. And unfortunately, now in this critical nexus, politics has played a role on the mental health. And I want you guys to remember this, if it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. We're about to sign off. Love you guys. Thank you for support. And I will continue to bring you guys solid content. Thank you again, Pete Charles and Ty Maynard Cutler. You guys have a blessed day. Bye-bye.